Chapter 127. That person frowned and tilted his head in dissatisfaction. It was obvious that he was extremely dissatisfied in his heart. Anyone could understand that he was fishing quietly here for a while, but King threw rocks at him as soon as you came. Not only did you scare the fish away, even my leisurely fishing was ruined by you. You actually King built a platform. Why don't you go to heaven? Why don't you just build a house here? This is the best way to burn a zither and cook a crane. Alright. You're finally done. You actually placed a chair on the stone platform? The man was truly shocked now. CK, are you trying to fish here? His eyes widened as he watched the unbelievable and unimaginable events unfold one after another. The person in charge seemed to be a rich young master, the kind that did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. No, this fellow was severely injured. He actually came to fish with such a heavy injury. Everything was done by the person behind him. She set up a table for him, set up a chair for him, and even made a backrest for him. She set up a fishing rod, a fishing line, a hook, and a float for him. He had even brought a small blanket. Are you going to help him fish again later? I say. Isn't this done? Still causing trouble. Plop, plop, plop. It was as if he wanted to smash all the fish in the lake to death as he threw bait in. After a while, he suddenly turned to smile at him and said, I'm so sorry for scaring all your fish away just now. I'll make a nest for you as well. Plop, plop, plop. He continued to throw bait at him for a long time. The fisherman was completely dumbfounded, tongue-tied and speechless. He was speechless for a long while. Even with his years of experience, he was still at a loss for what to do with the bizarre development before him. He could not help scratching his head. As he stretched his hand out, Yun could sensitively see that the man's head was mostly covered in grayish-white hair. He did not know how high his cultivation base was, but it seemed like he was not young anymore. When Yun finally sat down leisurely, at least an hour had passed. What a farce! However, the farce did not seem to have ended. It was only just the beginning because the elder saw Yun sitting calmly. He did not even have the intention to extend his fishing rod. He was only holding the bait, pinching it here and there. What was he up to this time? Cough. The old man coughed and asked doubtfully, Young master, you've spent a lot of effort to arrange the positions. You've even placed the bait everywhere. Why aren't you pulling the rod? Yun replied with a smile, I've frightened the fish just now. Most of them won't dare to come over now. There's bait on the left and right as bait. As long as I wait quietly for a while, the fish will be lured over. Of course, I'll drop the rod after some time. The old man laughed involuntarily. Then, I'm afraid that young master will have to wait for a long time. Based on my experience, after such a big commotion, there will be some palm-sized fishes coming over within 2 hours. The bigger fishes will definitely not come over. If you want to catch a big fish, you will have to wait at least 6 hours. Yun sat down comfortably and leaned against the back of the chair, saying faintly, As long as I can catch a big fish, forget 6 hours, I can even wait for 3 days and 3 nights. Yun smiled. Patience is needed to catch a big fish. Old sir, don't be impatient. Not only did the elder's plan to mock Yun fail, he had been taught a lesson instead. He choked for a moment. He sat down in a huff and shut his mouth, not saying another word. Initially, he wanted to get rid of this fellow with just a few words so that he could regain his peace. He didn't expect that this fellow would actually talk for 3 days and 3 nights. Alright, he wanted to see if this rich young master who always asked others to do his dirty work really had that much patience. However, his silence did not mean that Yun would not speak either. Old sir, where did you buy this straw cape? It looks like it's not bad. As long as you wear it, you won't have to be afraid of wind, frost, rain, and snow. And this bamboo hat, it can cover the entire lake. The elder snorted but did not answer. If only there was a bamboo hat to cover this huge sun. Yun sighed, sounding like he was sighing. The elder still did not speak. May I ask old sir's name? Yun asked. The elder was completely focused on the float, turning a deaf ear to Yun. Old sir, how old are you? Yun asked again. The elder's gaze was still fixed on the float, not saying a word. Yun Yang scratched his head and suddenly fished out a rock the size of a human head from beside him, throwing it with a "heh." Poof! Water splashed into the sky. It landed right in front of the elder's fishing rod. A single rock raised 1,000 ripples. The surface of the lake that had finally calmed down was stirred again. After this rock, it would be a long time before any fish would come here again. The elder stood up at once and said angrily, "Young master, how can you be so insensible? You, aren't you causing trouble?" Yun Yang asked with a grin. "May I ask old sir's name?" The elder huffed angrily. "This old man is going somewhere else. Not here anymore." He stood up and made to leave. "Old Fong, let's not stay here either. This old sir seems to be an expert. How can we miss an expert? Let's follow him. Wherever he goes, we'll follow. We can't lose him." Yun Yang called out to Fong Mafei and stood up as well. The elder was speechless. He let out a long sigh towards the sky. He could not help but feel around his back and actually took out a huge wine gourd. Twisting the lid open, he took a huge gulp and glared at Yun Yang. "This is infuriating. Old sir, don't be angry. Don't be angry." Yun Yang said gently, "You're already so old. What if something bad happens to you? Wouldn't it be a pity that this place is so deserted? What if something happens to you?" This time, not only did the elder almost pass out from anger, even Fong Mafei was speechless. Until now, he still could not figure out what Yun Yang meant by causing trouble like this. Wasn't he simply making trouble out of nothing? "Young master, are you still young? Was it really appropriate to do this?" Yun Yang looked at the huge wine gourd, a strange look in his eyes as he said softly, "Old sir, this wine is not bad." The old man snorted and rolled his eyes, hugging the wine gourd. "This child actually wants to drink my wine? Is he thinking too much?" The old man snorted and wiped his mouth before putting the wine gourd back, still unwilling to talk to a certain someone. "Old Fong, where's our wine?" Yun Yang turned to ask. The corners of Fong Mafei's lips twitched. Immediately. A moment later, a table was placed in front of Yun Yang. Then, 10 piping hot side dishes were placed on the table one by one. 2 wine glasses, sparkling and translucent. A pot of wine was placed on the edge of the table. However, one could tell at a glance that this wine pot was obviously an antique that had been around for a long time. Even the sticker on it was almost unrecognizable. From the outside to the inside, it was obvious that the pot was old wine, a fine wine that had been around for a long time. The old man, who was holding the fishing rod, glanced at the pot of wine unintentionally and actually paused for a moment. His eyes, which were covered by the bamboo hat, could not help but stare blankly. Speaking of wine, there have been countless brewmasters in this world for thousands of years. There are also a variety of wines that compete with each other, each with their own ingenuity. Yun Yang said slowly, however, to this day, there is only the god of wine from 330 years ago, Feng Xiang'e, who can be acknowledged by the entire continent as a brewmaster. As he spoke, even the old man who had been indifferent could not help but nod slowly. Indeed, Feng Xiang'e's achievements in the field of wine were undeniable. As an expert of his generation, Feng Xiang'e stood aloof from worldly affairs all his life. From the age of 30 to the age of 279, which was 20 years ago when he went missing, he had only devoted himself to 2 things in his life. One was medicine, and the other was wine. Back then, the martial world called him the phantom physician god of wine. His medical skills were superb as well, but his medical methods were unconventional, which was why he was called Phantom. However, let's not talk about his medical skills today. Let's talk about his wine. The number of wines he had personally brewed in his lifetime was uncountable. However, there were very few wines that could be recognized by him, and there were only 7 in total. He called these 7 wines the Big Dipper wine. The old man sat aside with a hint of mockery on his face under the bamboo hat. "What do you know? Feng Xiang'e has better and more highly regarded wines." "Humph," Yun Yang said faintly. However, not many people know that this so-called Big Dipper wine is only a wine that Feng Xiang'e has promoted to the public. Although each of the Big Dipper wine is already a premium brew, it's still not at the level of a superior quality. Actually, the 3 wines that Feng Xiang'e treasured the most were the wines he used to entertain his friends. They were divided into the heaven, earth, and man wines. He used them to entertain his friends based on their friendship, cultivation base, past, and experiences.
The old man heaved a long sigh of relief, thinking, "This child actually knows such a story."
How remarkable. Yunyang said, "These 3 wines are considered superior, but they're still not the premium wines that Feng Xiang'e admired the most. The premium wines that he kept in his collection, the best wines in the entire Tianxian continent, aren't these heaven, earth and man wines, but the prime of wines. The ingredients used to brew the so-called prime of wines are already extremely rare." Feng Xiang'e had collected countless rare and precious materials from the peaks and seabed of Tiannan, northwest, and sea to brew them. He had only brewed 99 pots in his lifetime. When the wine was brewed, it was sealed without tasting it, difficult to open. Even Feng Xiang'e himself could hardly drink it. However, when he was 230 years old, he only drank this one wine when he drank. To Feng Xiang'e then, there was no other wine in this world that could go down his throat other than this prime of wines. When he disappeared, there were only 9 pots of this famous but untasted prime of wines left.
They were sold out the moment they were discovered.
In the end, only 6 pots entered the market and were auctioned many times. According to the highest price, it seemed to be 3,000 mystical crystals. Yunyang spoke slowly. There seemed to be a strange charm in his voice. 3,000 mystical crystals. On the other side, the old man wearing the bamboo hat looked up at the sky, his heart filled with regret. "I got the news of the auction back then too late.
Otherwise, one of the 6 pots of wine would have been mine."
Chapter 128. To this day, the 6 pots of wine that had entered the market have been hidden by wine lovers and are rarely seen again. As for the other 3 pots of wine, no one knows of their whereabouts. However, one day, when the empire of Yutong's Marquis Yun went out, he saved someone by accident and became best friends with the person. When they parted reluctantly, the person gave Marquis Yun a pot of wine. Coincidentally, it was the prime of wine. Back then, it had been 112 years since Feng Xiang'e brewed this pot of wine. Yunyang smiled.
The old man could not hold it in any longer and said loudly, "What are you trying to say after spouting so much nonsense?
Could it be that this wine of yours is the prime of wine? What a joke." Yunyang smiled. "It looks like old Sir is not from Tiantang City." "So what?" The old man's tone was irascible. "If you were from Tiantang City, you would know that the Marquis of Heavenly Clouds, who terrorized the world with his sword, has an only young master. His name is Yunyang." Yunyang said, "This young master Yunyang is born with rosy lips and pearly white teeth. He is handsome and elegant, with a dignified demeanor.
He is one of the most handsome men in this world. Perhaps it could be said that if there was a contest for handsome men in this world, this young master Yunyang would be crowned the winner without even having to participate."
Oh well, Amos was losing his cool more and more. He was on the verge of flying into a rage. No matter how much you praise others, it's still nonsense. Since he was praising this young master Yunyang so much, this fellow in front of him could not be Yunyang. How could there be anyone in this world who would praise himself like this? Otherwise, he would be too shameless. Since he was not Yunyang, what use was he?
He was not fated with a prime of wine after all. Yunyang said with a grin, "Old sir, it must be fate that we meet by chance."
Let this young master introduce himself.
"I am Yunyang, the only young master of Marquis Yun who we were talking about and praising just now." The old man almost coughed.
This sentence was simply a strange and unexpected peak. "You've been showering me with extravagant praise, but it turns out that you're just praising yourself? Is there really such a shameless person in this world?" The old man almost laughed in exasperation.
He squinted his eyes and teased, "You are the young master of Marquis of Heavenly Clouds, Yunyang?"
"According to what you've said, this jar of wine is the sovereign of wine?
One of the remaining 9 jars of wine?"
"Wrong." Yunyang was resolute. The old man was stunned again. "Why are you bragging if it's not you?" Yunyang said, "According to what I know, the owners of the 6 pots of wine that were auctioned off were wine connoisseurs, but they were all addicted to wine and had already finished the dream. No one knows where the remaining 2 jars are, let alone if they still exist in this world."
Yunyang said faintly, "Therefore, this pot of wine of mine can be said to be the one and only pot of wine in this world.
It makes sense to say that it's the one and only pot of wine in existence." The old man was stunned. "Is this really that jar?" Yunyang said faintly, "Whether it is or not, there's a way to verify it. Since old Sir likes wine, I'm sure you've heard that Feng Xiang's supreme wine can form a soaring phoenix in the air once the clay seal is broken and the fragrance of the wine wafts out. This is Feng Xiang's unique mark. I believe that not many people would imitate it for the few remaining jars of wine. The old man's interest was piqued at once. He was drooling with desire, unable to sit still. Yun Yang's palm rose and fell. There was a loud clap. The clay seal had been broken, and an indescribable fragrance of wine wafted out. The old man took 3 steps towards him, his nostrils twitching wildly. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As the fragrance of the wine rose, the image of a soaring phoenix slowly materialized in the air. Although it was hovering in the air, its arrogant gaze was filled with disdain, looking down on the world. It's the supreme wine. The old man's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Looking at the phoenix that was slowly dispersing in the air, his breathing quickened. With a raise of his hand, the bamboo hat flew away. It revealed a chiseled face that was filled with vicissitudes, but his gaze was clear and bright. His eyes were like a 4- or 5-year-old child's, clear with distinct black and white. There was even a hint of innocence in them. The old man's hair was grayish-white like what Yun Yang had seen just now, but looking at each strand by strand, he did not look old at all. Instead, he was filled with the energy of life. The vicissitudes on his face were as if he had gone through all the worldly affairs of his life. At first glance, he looked lonely and weary, but upon closer inspection, one would actually think that the face was handsome. His eyebrows, in particular, were slanted upwards, but the arc was not too wide. There was no menacing aura. However, if he had sprung up abruptly, the imposing aura would have been quite intimidating. Yun Yang was even more certain when he saw it. Of course, it's the supreme wine. Yun Yang slowly began to remove the last layer of defense on the wine jar. Using a dagger, he only managed to make a thumb-sized cut. The old man's expression was one of admiration. Those who had never tasted the wine brewed by Feng Xiang would not know the intention of doing so. Even if there was only a little fragrance from Feng Xiang's wine, it would be a great waste. Yun Yang's actions made a thumb-sized cut at the top, but the bottom was at most the size of a soybean. After pouring a cup, he filled it with the wooden cork that he had scooped out. It was still seamless and the wine would not escape through the gap. Yun Yang smiled and said, "It's Feng Xiang's supreme wine after all. Of course, I have to cherish it." The old man nodded with a smile. "That's right." Yun Yang lifted the wine jar and slowly poured the clear but slightly viscous wine into the goblet. When it was 80% full, the wine's fragrance was intoxicating, filling the entire lake. Finishing the goblet, Yun Yang took a whiff of it, intoxicated, and said, "It's indeed a dreamy item close to Tao. Legend has it that drinking wine of supremacy can bring one close to the realm of Tao. Sigh, it's a pity that there's too little of it." As he sighed, he stuffed the wooden cork back in. Placing the wine jar aside carefully, he picked up the goblet and took a sip. His eyes shone. "Great wine. It's a never-before-seen wine indeed. It lives up to its reputation as a dreamy item." The old man beside him could not help being stunned, stuttering, You're not going to buy me a drink?" This fellow had laid out a table full of dishes, brought out a jar of wine, and talked about the past and present, blowing his own trumpet for half a day, hooking this old man's appetite to his throat. "In the end, you're going to drink it yourself? You've laid out 2 goblets, all right? Are you just trying to look symmetrical?" Yun Yang was even more shocked, staring at the old man with wide eyes. "Buy you a drink? Why should I buy you a drink?" The old man's mouth was agape as he looked at him in shock. Didn't you say so much just to buy me a drink?" Yun Yang looked at him speechlessly. "Old sir, I've said so much just to buy you a drink? Where did this come from? You're thinking too much." If Dong Tianling and the other popinjays were here, they would definitely slap the table in shock. Boss is boss. What's wrong with me praising myself? What's wrong with me analyzing the origins of all my wines in detail? Can't I show off? When it came to showing off, it had to be done in front of others. This is the ultimate example of popinjays of my generation. This is obviously the pinnacle of pretentiousness, a textbook example of popinjays. Perfect, it's too perfect. The old man was exasperated, the veins on his forehead pulsating. For a moment, he was speechless. "I've said so much from the beginning to the end,
I only wanted to introduce my wine.
Yunyang said in confusion. I'm done with the introduction, am I right? You know it too, don't you? You know it too, don't you? We had a pleasant conversation. It's done, isn't it? Isn't it also a pleasure for you to watch me drink? Do you think that just anyone can see the wonderful appearance of the wine's supremacy? One should know how to be content. Yunyang said seriously, at least, I've let you see the phoenix. The old man suddenly had the urge to kill someone. Your father listened to you for half a day just to see the phoenix formed by the smell of wine. How despicable must I be then? Actually, I have a hobby of introducing the good things I own to others. It's fine if you think I'm showing off, Yunyang said with a smile that was especially despicable. Yunyang grinned. His smile was especially wicked as he said, my delicious food, drinks, fun, all the good things I have. I enjoy them myself, watching others drool over them. I don't even need to eat to go with the wine, and I can just enjoy a few more bowls of rice. It's so satisfying, you know? The old man's exasperation grew more pronounced and thicker. He was so embarrassed that he did not know where to put his hands and feet. He felt like billions of mud horses were galloping through the manure soup after a rainstorm. This is so embarrassing. Your father has lived for hundreds of years and I've never been as embarrassed as I am today. My face is burning. This bastard is the most despicable person I've ever seen in my life. But why do I feel that what this fellow said is so reasonable? Even if it's crooked, it's still reasonable. I actually have nothing to say. Humph. The old man stomped his feet and turned to leave. He really did not have the face to stay here. However, Yunyang suddenly spoke again. If old sir is really bored and doesn't blame me for startling your fish just now, then let's fish, drink and chat. Watching the scenery of the lake and the mountains, feeling the chilly autumn wind. It's one of life's great joys. The old man had already turned around. When he suddenly heard these words, he couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. If I were to turn back and drink, wouldn't I be even more embarrassed? Even though he wanted to turn back, his neck was stiff and he refused to turn back no matter what. However, if he did not turn back, the pot of wine would have already been opened. It would probably be gone forever. Yunyang spoke again. It's better to share the joy than to be happy alone. Please do me this favor, old sir. The old man turned back like a whirlwind and chuckled. It's rare for you to show such sincerity. It would be impolite for this old man to refuse. The smile on his face softened. Yunyang was delighted. He had learned this trick from Dong Tianling. He had to admit that this despicable person's trick seemed to be quite useful. When Yunyang heard about such a person, he already had a plan in his mind. The difficult part was only the beginning. How to get him to drink his wine. This was the most important point. How could such a person come and drink obediently just because Yunyang offered to buy him a drink? Yunyang finally reached the goal of the first stage after going around in circles for half a day. Since the wine had reached his expectations, then, no matter what, this was the only way for him to fight against the other side at the moment. What to do next was the most important thing. Success or failure depended on this one move. Tonight at 00 p.m., Supreme was released. Brothers and sisters, please subscribe and support. Yunyang's success or failure depended on this one move, and so did the success or failure of Supreme. 2 months of free, 410,000 words of updates. All the effort would be revealed at midnight. Chapter 129. Of course, Yunyang would not make things difficult for him. He poured a goblet of wine for the old man and raised his cup. Please. The old man had already picked it up hastily. Please. He tipped his head back and emptied the goblet. He praised. Unrivaled in the world indeed. The prime of wine lives up to its reputation. I'm afraid I'll have to quit drinking after drinking this wine. Then, his expression turned solemn. The wine had dispersed and he could faintly feel an inexplicable force of Tao. It was an impact of the realm of Tao. Although it was weak and almost undetectable, such an impact was enough to shake an expert cultivator like him. The force of Tao that could only appear in this wine at its peak was what made Feng Xiong's wine so precious. He then took a deep breath and collected the wine from his limbs and bones, suppressing it into the secret parts of his body. Now was not the best time to comprehend it. He would release it when the time was right and he wanted to comprehend it. With his cultivation base and control over his body,
It was not an exaggeration to say that he could force the goblet of wine out of his body at any time and pour it back into the goblet to drink it again. The effect and strength of the wine would not diminish even if he were to drink it again.
If Yunyang knew what this old man was doing, he would definitely be dumbfounded. He drank the wine down his throat and swallowed it, burying it into his body, not absorbing it at all. That was the real deal. Yunyang could not even imagine what kind of expert would be able to achieve such a feat at his current stage. If this old man was a little more extreme and disliked Yunyang, he would most likely be able to crush Yunyang to death as long as his aura reached a certain level, without needing to fight. What an expert! However, before Yunyang came here, he had already disregarded his own life and death. Yunyang estimated that he might not be able to defeat Old He's cultivation base even if he cultivated for another 10 years. If he could not find a breakthrough here, what was the harm in dying here? Another goblet. Yunyang's breath reeked of wine. Good wine. The old man was speechless looking at Yunyang's breath that reeked of wine. It had to be said that it was a great waste of God's gift for Yunyang to drink such an exquisite wine that only deities were worthy of. Because with his current level of cultivation, he was completely unable to comprehend the true wonders of this wine. Like a cow chewing on a peony. The old man let out a long sigh, raised his cup, and drained it in one gulp. Yunyang rolled his eyes. What's wrong with you, old man? I've already treated you to a drink, and it's such an outstanding supreme of wine at that. Yet you're saying that I'm just a cow chewing on peonies. There was no one else like him. However, following the effects of the alcohol, the two of them were clearly getting warmer and warmer. Feng Mafei, who was watching from 100 feet behind him, felt countless question marks hovering over his head. He just couldn't figure it out. Young master. Supreme Cloud. You didn't pay attention to so many important things and came here to fish. It's fine that you're fishing. You're injured now. It's good that you're cultivating and recovering your energy. However, not only are you not fishing properly, you're also provoking others to fish properly. First, you've offended them and now you're treating them to a drink. This is fine, but what you've taken out is the only remaining jar of this priceless wine in the entire Tianxian continent, and you're treating an old man whom you've never met before. This was truly an absolute waste. Feng Mafei, who had some understanding of the supreme of wine, felt like he was about to faint. If he did not know that Yunyang was Supreme Cloud, just by looking at his behavior, he was obviously an extreme popinjay, a super popinjay that surpassed the heavens. Old Sir likes fishing very much. Yunyang smiled. Fishing is a form of pleasure, and also a way of life. The old man drank with his eyes squinted. You're right, but there aren't many people who can focus on fishing in peace in this continent now. Yunyang sighed. I like fishing very much too. Yunyang's voice turned deep and distant. Old Sir is much older than me. I'm sure your realization is deeper than mine. The old man asked curiously. Realization? You're so young. What realization do you have? Why don't you tell me about it first? Yunyang smiled faintly. Then this junior shall start the ball rolling. I'll listen to Old Sir's opinion later. I personally think that when we're fishing, we form heaven, earth and man, the coexistence of the three elements. The old man was taken aback. What do you mean? Such a theory was unheard of. Even though the old man was knowledgeable, he was still interested in probing further. When we're fishing, we're the heaven. The water in front of us is, of course, the earth. The fish in the water are humans. Yunyang said leisurely, the bait we throw can be anything in this boundless world. It can be wine, women, avarice, fame, and fortune. As for the fish below, due to their different personalities and preferences, they choose the bait they like to chase after. Whether it's a big or small fish, as long as the bait we throw catches its fancy, it'll take the bait. The only difference is the length of time. Even if it's a fish that stands aloof from worldly affairs, it can't avoid taking a fancy to a certain bait and will take the bait it likes. Yunyang said, it's just like life in this continent. How many people can avoid the temptation of wine, women, avarice, fame, and fortune? Watching a fish being caught by me, at that moment, my heart will be filled with a myriad of emotions. It's indescribable. It means that no matter how much the fish that's been hooked struggles, it can't escape its fate. Yunyang said, isn't it the same for humans? As long as you step onto a certain path and work hard for a certain pursuit, there's basically no turning back. Actually, we're eating bait every day. Or rather, we're moving forward with the bait that we yearn for in our hearts.
Yunyang smiled and raised his cup.
Please.
The old man frowned and thought deeply before saying, That makes sense.
It really does make sense.
I didn't expect you to have such an epiphany at such a young age.
Yunyang smiled faintly. Also, looking at the water in front of us, even if it's not moving, it feels like it's floating and constantly changing. Perhaps, when we can't even notice it, the fish in the water has already experienced a lot of vicissitudes. As for heaven's will, although it's existed since the beginning of time, why would it care about a person? Or a person? Heaven's will goes on forever, but how many times has the human realm changed and changed? From this point of view, what's the difference between us and the fish? There are even some places where we're not as good as the fish.
Humans are not as good as the fish.
The old man closed his eyes and thought about Yunyang's words carefully.
After a long time he sighed and said, You're right. He paused and said, What you've said is not bad at all.
It makes sense.
He kept his eyes closed and did not open them. After a while, he opened them and said, Thank you, young friend, for your guidance.
He actually bowed to Yunyang in a very formal manner. His eyes were filled with contemplation. After a long time he said, Young friend, you're young but you seem to have experienced a lot. Yunyang smiled faintly. Of course not as much as you.
The old man kept his thoughts and said with a smile, Let's drink, let's drink.
Please. Yunyang drank as he poured wine while the old man emptied his goblet, looking extremely refreshed. The pot of prime of wine was about 10 caddies at most. After 100 years of accumulation, there were only 4 to 5 caddies of wine left. It was emptied before long. Although Yunyang had drunk quite a bit as well, it was only about 20 to 30% of the total amount. The remaining 70 to 80% had gone into the old man's stomach.
Feng Mafei was envious of the scene, grumbling inwardly,
Oh young master, oh Lord Supreme Cloud, why didn't you share some of this good stuff with me and Lao Mei? Is it really all right to let an outsider take all of it? However, what young friend said isn't applicable here. The old man was embarrassed to see that he had basically drunk all of it, so he took the initiative to speak up. May I ask what it is? Yunyang asked. There's a type of fish in this lake that not only are fishing experts rarely able to catch, but even cultivation experts are helpless against it, the old man said. Yunyang was taken aback and said in surprise, Oh, may I ask what's so special about this fish that even cultivation experts can't do anything about it? The old man chuckled and said, The reason this fish can't be caught is because it has an innate ability. Once it's attacked by an external force, be it mystical chi or any other force, even if it's the force of thought, it'll turn into flowing water immediately and leave no trace behind. How can it be caught? Even if one were to catch this fish when it's defenseless, it'll turn into flowing water and mist immediately, disappearing without a trace. No matter how strong one's cultivation base is, one can't capture even a drop of the fish's essence. There's such a mystical fish in the 1,000-feet lake. Yunyang was stunned. That's right, there's such a mystical fish. The old man said. Yunyang thought about it and said, You said that fishing experts rarely get anything, but it doesn't mean that they don't get anything at all. This means that although this fish is mystical, there's still a chance of catching it. The old man smiled and said, That's right. This fish can't be caught by force, but it can be caught with fishing hooks. As long as the hook is successfully hooked onto the fish's mouth, the fish will no longer have the ability to turn into flowing water. Once it leaves the water, it'll be no different from an ordinary fish. It's not right to say that this fish is completely the same as an ordinary fish, because this fish's appearance is very strange. There are only 7 scales on its entire body, and each scale is of a different color. Old sir, are you talking about the 7-scaled deity? Yunyang was moved. But this is only a legend of the 1,000-feet lake. That's right. It's the legendary 7-scaled deity, but I can guarantee that this fish truly exists. The old man said faintly, Besides, there are only 3 places in the entire Tianxian continent that have this fish, and this 1,000-feet lake is the 4th place that has yet to be discovered. Yunyang suddenly thought of something. Chapter 130. When the 9 Supremes had first gathered, Supreme Earth had said that although Supreme Water's physique was compatible with the 9 Heavens domain, it was not the best. One day, when Supreme Water returned, The group was surprised to find out that Supreme Water's cultivation speed had become the fastest among them. Supreme Earth was very puzzled about this. He had even asked Supreme Water what was going on. Supreme Water could not explain it either. He only said that his cultivation base could not keep up and he was depressed, so he went fishing at the 1,000-Feet lake to relax. He caught a few fish and ate them.
He did not feel anything unusual, but when he cultivated the water spirit conjuration, he was unprecedentedly skilled. He even felt that the water spirit conjuration was a cultivation method tailor-made for him. He did not need to put in much effort and his progress could be improved by leaps and bounds. The few of them had even gone to the 1,000-Feet lake to catch fish for this. After all, Supreme Water's only special encounter during that period of time was to eat a few fish from the 1,000-Feet lake. It was a pity that although they had caught a lot of fish, almost all the fish in the 1,000-Feet lake had been caught that time. They ate until their bellies were round and they were almost all fattened up, but there was no effect at all. In the end, he denied this possibility. However, Supreme Earth's fishing habit seemed to have been formed then. Among the brothers, the ones with the highest cultivation base were Supreme Earth, Supreme Water, and Supreme Thunder. In spite of this, Supreme Water was the best when it came to the cultivation of their respective arcane skills. Yun Yang's thoughts ran wild. From 1 to 2, another incident surfaced in his mind. One day 2 years ago, Supreme Earth had returned from fishing and called out to Supreme Water mysteriously, saying that he would treat him to fish. Since then, Supreme Water's arcane skill cultivation had exploded at an even higher rate than before. He had advanced triumphantly and had broken through the 7th stage of the water spirit conjuration. Compared to the other brothers, he was 3 to 4 levels higher. However, the brothers were only happy about it and did not think too much about it. Since then, as long as Supreme Earth had nothing to do and had no mission, he would squat here to fish every day. Could this be the reason why Big Brother would come here to fish whenever he had nothing to do?
A realization formed in Yun Yang's heart at that moment. Old sir, since no one else has noticed the peculiarity of this lake, how did you discover it? Yun Yang asked curiously. This old man came to Tiantang City a few years ago because... I happened to look at the 1,000-Feet lake and saw a faint rainbow. That's why I came down to fish. Back then, I caught a 7-scaled immortal from here. That's how I felt. The old man smiled. When he spoke, he sounded a little unnatural. If these words were heard by an ordinary person, they would probably just let it go. In spite of this, Yun Yang had grasped 2 key points immediately. Occasionally, he would overlook the 1,000-Feet lake. Overlook? What did that mean? This 1,000-Feet lake is a vast expanse of flat land. Where are you looking down from? How exactly was he going to get a bird's eye view? And, come down to fish. Where did you come down to fish? However, Yun Yang's expression remained unchanged as he said with a smile. Legend has it that after the 7-scaled fairy eats it, one can become immortal and retain one's looks forever. I wonder if it's true. The old man snorted and said, That's just a rumor about a village man and a foolish woman. How can it be trusted? In this world, there's nothing that can make its user immortal and retain one's looks forever. Yun Yang asked curiously, May I ask Senior, what are the benefits of eating the 7-scaled fairy? Senior said that you caught one by chance. I'm sure you're familiar with its benefits. The old man looked at him meaningfully and said, The human body is in line with the universe's creation, yin and yang, the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. These physiques are the foundation of defying nature. However, those who know this truth are few and far between in this world. Most of the people in this world will never know what kind of physique they have, wasting the precious raft that is the human body. Among all these physiques, there's one called the water spirit celestial body. To put it more bluntly, it's a body of water, a physique of water. The water physique is actually not that rare. There are many people who can swim faster than others. They can swim fast, and they don't find it difficult to swim underwater. There are even people who can breathe underwater, and they don't feel uncomfortable staying underwater for a long time. This kind of person is probably the so-called water physique. They're compatible with the water spirit celestial body. The old man said faintly, However, this is only the most common and broadest view. To advance this physique to the next level and become a water spirit celestial body, one needs to go through 1,000 hardships, go through life and death. And still, one might not succeed. However, with the help of the 7-scaled fairy in this lake,
The old man seemed to despise the name seven-scaled fairy, but he still said, as long as one eats one, the potential of a person with the water spirit celestial body can be activated, transforming into a true water spirit celestial body.
This is the unique effect of this fish. Even if a person without the water spirit celestial body eats it, they'll feel like they've returned home after entering the water. There's no need to worry about drowning. Yun Yang hesitated and asked, what if it's eaten by someone with another physique?
The old man frowned, a little impatient with the question.
Eaten by someone with another physique?
There'll be effects for people with other physiques as well, but the effects won't be great. For example, those with the wood spirit celestial body will benefit from eating it because water is wood. However, those with the metal and earth spirit celestial bodies won't benefit at all if they eat it. What's more, if those with the fire spirit celestial body eat it, it'll damage their physique instead. It's not just a saying that water and fire don't mix. Yun Yang lowered his head, feeling a warmth in his heart. It turned out that the reason his eldest Supreme Earth came here to fish every day was not for him, but for his brother Supreme Water. For his brother to eat this fish and increase his ability. He had been fishing here all these years as long as there was no mission.
What if the fated one eats two of the seven-scaled fairy?
Yun Yang's heart wavered, but he asked persistently. The old man looked at Yun Yang strangely.
This old man has only caught one after so many years. It's already a blessing from the heavens. You actually want to eat two?
Yun Yang chuckled awkwardly. The world is unpredictable.
Who can say for sure?
There's always a chance.
Suddenly, he recalled his current physique and the air of vitality. He could not help asking, is this fish considered a mystical beast?
The question stumped the old man. After a moment's pause, he pondered for a long time before saying, it's really hard to say.
He looked at Yun Yang's body, measuring him from head to toe, and chuckled. However, if you eat this fish, it'll probably be quite useful.
Yun Yang was delighted.
Do I have the water spirit physique?
The old man chuckled strangely and said, you're definitely not the water spirit physique, but you can eat it.
And it's useful to eat it.
His gaze grew stranger and stranger. Finally, an irrepressible smile crept onto his face. Because your physique is yin and yang in one body, the universe and the five elements are all in one.
Your physique is actually an amalgamation of all human physiques.
Yun Yang heaved a sigh of relief and said, I didn't know that my physique is so impressive.
Haha.
The old man could not help but chuckle. Impressive indeed. This old man has never known that there's actually a physique like yours in this world. Your physique can indeed be called the best in this world.
Yun Yang did not mind, but he was excited nonetheless.
Really?
Really?
The old man chuckled strangely.
Your physique is the best in this world.
Trash. Water and fire converge, wind and thunder are one, yin and yang are compatible. The five elements are all in one, the universe and the universe are all in one. Your physique is truly the Milky Way. The old man could not help but guffaw as he spoke. Your traits are more numerous than the stars in the sky. This is the Milky Way. He was still babbling on, trying to explain himself. Yun Yang was exasperated, his pretty face as dark as the bottom of a wok. Looking at the old man's wide-open mouth and his tongue that was bouncing happily along with his laughter, Yun Yang felt like he had just been F***ed.
I've treated you to such good wine and you're actually insulting me like this. Don't you know how to be more merciful? He wished he could scoop the wine out.
Give me back my wine.
Give me back my prime of wine, my dream.
All right. We've talked so much and so much time has passed.
Let's focus on fishing.
The old man walked back, swaying. Every year, after this period of time, we can no longer catch this seven-scaled fairy that you speak of. Yun Yang's eyes darted around as he said, Old sir, why don't we make a bet? The old man turned his head and raised his brows.
Bet? What are we betting on?
Yun Yang replied, Of course we're betting on fishing here. How about we bet on catching this seven-scaled fairy? The old man looked at him thoughtfully and finally chuckled. Child, so you know who this old man is? Yun Yang wore a bashful smile. I didn't know at first. The old man snorted and said, You didn't know at first?
If you really didn't know, would you have taken out such good wine?
You've used all sorts of tricks to make this old man notice you. Then you've provoked me.
You've used the wine to ease the tension and talked about life. Step by step, you've come to this point and now you want to make a bet with this old man? A pot of prime of wine is not something an ordinary person can take out. However, you've only taken it out as a stepping stone. How is it right if you don't have a request for such a grand gesture? Since you have a request, how would you know that I can fulfill your request if you don't know who I am? Child, don't be so glib. Yunyang chuckled. Calm down. Calm down. It's only natural that I have a request. Just like you said, I, Yunyang, am a handsome man of my generation. Naturally, I'm not a fool. Chapter 131. Trap? How could it be? Yunyang smiled. What trap would I dare set up after knowing your identity? The old man looked askance at Yunyang and nodded, snorting. You, child, are not simple. Not simple at all. You've paid such a high price just to make a bet with me. Let me ask you, how are you so sure? Yunyang chuckled, knowing that playing mind games with such a person would only backfire, so he told the truth instead. The original intention of this was really a coincidence. I only heard that someone was fishing here. So I was very curious. According to what I know, the fish in this 1,000-feet lake can't be caught, so there are very few people who fish here. Based on this reason, I paid some attention. Then, your attire also made me suspicious. At that time, I was only a little suspicious. When I came here and saw you, that little bit became too. When you suddenly exuded your aura, although it was weak and lasted only for a short time, it still made me suspicious. When I saw your wine gourd, my initial bit of suspicion turned into 30% confidence. Actually, the life of enlightenment that I talked about later was more of a test. Those with a higher realm will be enlightened while those with a lower realm will think that it makes sense. However, your thanks have increased my confidence. Then, Senior talked about the fish and easily revealed the secret of the 7-scaled fairy in this lake. It's obvious that you don't want to owe me a favor, so you've given me information that exceeds the value of my wine. There aren't many with such a temperament. At this point, my confidence has become 50%. Yunyang said casually, 50% confidence is enough as a basis for judgment. It doesn't matter whether you're the person I imagined you to be or not. Whether you are or not, my good karma has been sown. The bet is only a means. Whether I win or lose, our friendship already exists. It's hard to erase it. I've won the bet. I can ask one thing of you. I've lost the bet, but with the friendship we have today, we'll meet again one day, even if the martial world is long and we're at the ends of the earth. Yunyang smiled and said, people like me won't give up any chance to benefit, but people like you don't care about what I care about. So me recognizing you and knowing you is no hindrance to you. It was just a very ordinary encounter. Isn't that right? Yunyang chuckled. What's more coincidental is that I really have nothing to do during this period of time. Fishing is really good. Having someone to accompany me is naturally even better. If I win the bet, I'll gain another benefit. Even if I don't win the bet, I can leave it for another day. It's still good. The old man laughed heartily. You're quite an interesting kid. What's even rarer is that everything you've said in front of me is the truth. It's all from your heart. This is very good. Yunyang chuckled bitterly. If I had the confidence to deceive you, I would have done so without hesitation. But in front of you, any lie, any ingenious deception is just a joke. If that's the case, just tell me the truth. You'll be happy, and I'll be happy too. There's no need to waste any extra effort. The old man guffawed again. Then he asked, you wouldn't really want to bet on fishing with me, would you? Aren't you a little too bold to bet on fishing with me, someone who's caught the 7-scaled fairy before? Yunyang said, there's no loss when there's a bet. You said that you've only caught one 7-scaled fairy in total. What if I'm lucky and really manage to catch one? The old man guffawed again. Good lad, you've got guts indeed. What about the rules of the bet? Yunyang smiled as well. Of course, whoever catches the 7-scaled fairy first or whoever catches the most will be the winner. The time limit is 3 days. If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. What are the stakes? The old man asked with narrowed eyes. The stakes. Yunyang thought about it and said, if you win, I'll think of a way to get you a pot of prime of wine. If you lose the lottery, just do me a favor. The old man snorted. Do you think that pot of wine of yours is worth so much? He looked at Yun Yang from the corner of his eyes. Then tell me. Yun Yang gave up without hesitation. If I lose, what do you want from me? The old man was stunned by Yun Yang's words. What can a small fry like you do for me? How about this? If I lose, I'll agree to any conditions. Yun Yang was eager to help the old man come up with ideas. As long as you win, you can be my godfather or my master. Dream on. The old man rolled his eyes and said resentfully, wanting to be my godson, wanting to be my master? With your physique. It's simply wishful thinking. Yun Yang smiled faintly. I'm relieved that you won't agree. Of course, the old man did not know that today's rejection would make him regret it for the rest of his life. Wait, what if it's a draw? Don't tell me you're planning to exchange the stakes after a draw and have this old man do something for you in exchange for you to acknowledge me as your godfather or be my disciple. The old man's gaze froze. If he could not catch anything, it would naturally be a draw. Yun Yang was taken aback when he heard the old man. He had never thought that a draw would happen. After a pause, he said, You're really thinking too much. If it's a draw, of course, all the stakes will be cancelled. If you're so hesitant or afraid of losing, then there's no harm in not going through with this bet. You don't have to provoke me. This old man will agree to it. The old man was so angry that his goatee was curling up. Then what about the stakes that you've decided on this, Junior? Yun Yang asked. Forget it. A pot of prime of wine it is. The old man seemed to have suffered a great loss as he said resentfully, This old man will suffer a little loss. He thought that if he had another pot, with the help of the wine's Tao state, he might really be able to break through his current shackles. By then, it would truly be wonderful. This child wants to win me in fishing? It's simply wishful thinking. For this Chilean fish, this old man has honed his fishing skills for so many years and settled his state of mind. Besides, it was still unknown how many Chilean fish there were in the 1,000-feet lake. The possibility of a draw would be the highest after 3 days. This old man would then be able to leave without any burden. How could this child with the surname Yun know that the Chilean fish was the smartest fish species in the world? Once one was caught, the other Chilean fish would sense it and turn into flowing water. They would not be able to be caught again and would not eat anything for at least a year. Old sir, what bait did you use? Yun Yang stretched his head over. The old man shrunk back immediately and kept all his bait, hiding it behind his buttocks as he stared at Yun Yang with widened eyes. You want to compete with me in fishing and you actually came over to ask about my bait? This old man has never seen someone as shameless as you. Yun Yang rubbed his nose sheepishly. Know thyself and thy enemy, and you will emerge victorious in every battle. He sat back down awkwardly. He took out his bait, crumpled it into a ball and hung some on the hook. Standing up, he flung the fishing rod out. The fishing rod in Yun Yang's hand was rather famous. It was made of feather bamboo. Not only was it light, it was long enough as well, 30 feet long. The fishing line and other facilities were top-notch as well. However, his skill in casting the hook was unbearable and unsightly. With just a flick of the rod, the old man beside him almost burst out laughing. An absolute rookie. Let's not talk about how well you flung the rod, but you actually managed to throw the bait away. You still want to fish? With an empty hook? With this level of skill, you actually dare to bet with me. Did this child lose to me on purpose and give me wine to bribe me? Too bad your father doesn't fall for it. I've won. There's no gratitude at all. Yun Yang at least had a good eye, quickly noticing the mistake he had made. He quickly retracted his rod and cast the bait again. This time, it was much better than the first time. An hour later, the old man began to catch fish. Although they were ordinary fish, they came one after another as if there was no end to them. The speed was incredibly fast and the fish that were caught grew bigger and bigger. At first, it was the size of a palm, then more than a catty, 2 catties, 5 catties. Now, there were more than 10 catties, 20 catties, and 30 to 40 catties that were caught. The old man did not collect the fish that had already taken the bait. Every time a fish took the bait, the old man would flick his finger and knock the fish out before putting it back into the water. The fish floated on the water surface with its belly up for a while, and when it woke up, it would escape. The best thing about this was that it would not dare to take the bait for a few days at least. In terms of success rate, the old man had already caught hundreds of fish,
but Yun Yang's float still did not budge. The fish in the 1,000-feet lake are the hardest to catch. There must be something wrong with the bait that this old man is using. Yun Yang was infuriated. This old man is cheating. Yun Yang had not caught a single fish even after a long time. Seeing the old man catching the fish that flew up like it was nothing, one bigger than the other, he was finally infuriated.
Who doesn't know how to cheat? Yun Yang had wanted to start cheating tomorrow, but looking at the situation now, he would definitely lose if he did not cheat.
After all, the old man had said that he had successfully caught a 7-scaled fairy before.
If he managed to catch one, it would be too late for him to cheat then. Yun Yang called out in his mind. Emmy! Come out quickly!
Ayaya!
Emmy was waving its vines in his deific consciousness space. It retracted its vines immediately when it heard Yun Yang's call, sending a strange message. What are you doing? Why are you calling me? Chapter 132.
Ayaya! Emmy felt wronged.
The vines wrapped themselves tightly around him from top to bottom. It did not respond to Yun Yang's greeting. You're using my energy to fish. Are you kidding, big brother? Even if you catch 100,000 caddies of fish, it won't be enough for me to catch one fish. It's the 7-scaled fairy fish. Let me tell you, eating it will bring you great benefits.
Ayaya! Really?
Try it if you don't believe me. If it doesn't work, I'll give you 10 jade pendants. Yun Yang promised.
Ayaya! Emmy retracted some of its vines and revealed half of its body, still waving at Yun Yang suspiciously.
Really? 10 jade pendants, is that a lot?
Ayaya! Still too little?
Emmy, don't be too greedy. All right, as long as you promise, I'll give you 2 jade pendants tomorrow morning. 2 in the morning, 2 at noon, 2 in the afternoon and 2 at night. This should be enough, right? Yun Yang gritted his teeth.
Yeah.
Emmy agreed. Its vines danced in joy.
It was rare for its master to be so generous, saying that he would give it so many good things tomorrow. A ball of energy was sent out.
This ball is too much. It's too wasteful. Can we split it into 100 portions?
Yun Yang discussed.
Yeah. A brave man would surely be motivated by a generous reward. Emmy agreed without hesitation and began to work. Yun Yang swung his rod again. The old man at the side looked at the rookie from the corner of his eyes. His heart was still filled with joy and confidence. The newbie is starting again. Ha. Suddenly, the water in front of Yun Yang's fishing rod surged as if there were many fishes fighting for it below. The float that had been motionless dropped abruptly. Yun Yang was overjoyed and quickly lifted the rod. The fishing line swished as a big fish was hooked. The old man could not help but stare. Yun Yang's action of lifting the rod was obviously too late. Under normal circumstances, the fish would have escaped long ago. How did he manage to catch it now? Yun Yang made a fuss and followed up with a series of clumsy follow-up actions, pulling the rod upwards without any technique at all. After a round of forceful dragging, a big fish weighing more than 10 kilograms was pulled up. The old man was also puzzled. What thread did you use?
Yun Yang smiled happily.
Wild silk, isn't it?
It's pliable enough. The old man was speechless. Where's the hook?
It's the black iron hook. Once it's hooked, it won't be able to escape. The old man raised his head to look at the sky, as though he was trying to ascertain whether or not this place was the profound sky continent. The heavenly worm silk was extremely flexible. This was undeniable, but its weight was too light. Once it entered the water, it would inevitably float. Although the weight of the black iron hook was not light, it was filled with cold chi. When fish felt this cold, 99% of them would avoid it. This guy actually used the combination of the natural silk and the black iron hook to catch fish. This was the strangest thing he had ever seen in his life. Luck, it's definitely luck, it's definitely hard to replicate. The old man muttered to himself and turned his head to continue fishing. Then, he was surprised to find that there were no more fish on his side. On Yun Yang's side, the water was tumbling and the surface was murky. It was as if there was a large group of fish fighting for the bait below, and only those who won would be able to eat it. As if to prove the old man's imagination, the float on Yun Yang's fishing rod sank once again. Yun Yang lifted it and saw a large fish of more than 20 catties being hauled up forcefully. The old man was dumbfounded, unable to believe what he was seeing.
Then, it was probably the official start of Yun Yang's fishing show. A certain someone had used extremely clumsy fishing skills to continuously pull up one big fish after another, then knock them out and release them back. The surface of the water grew murkier, the splashes heavier. Some of the impatient fish jumped out of the water directly, pouncing towards where Yun Yang's hook was as if their lives depended on it. "This is uncanny," the old man mumbled to himself.
"I'm not using something ordinary. I'm using treasured ingredients specially prepared for the fish's taste.
There's even 1,000-year-old fish hot grass in there."
What was going on? What was going on? What bait did you use?
The old man finally could not help asking.
"This." Yun Yang tossed a ball over.
The old man took it in his hand and sniffed it, identifying it again and again, confirming that it was the most ordinary bait. He tried to hang it on his hook, but the float did not budge at all, with no fish interested in it.
The fish on Yun Yang's side looked like they were going to a market.
The surface of the water had already gathered into a large black mass, squeezed into a ball.
The old man felt as if his worldview had been turned upside down. Could it be that the fish were especially fond of such rookies now? Otherwise, how could the scene before him be explained?
Then, the old man's side became quiet while Yun Yang's side became unprecedentedly busy. One after another, the big fish began to fly up. 20 caddies, 30 caddies, 40 caddies. The biggest one had actually gone up to more than 80 caddies. When the whole fish was hooked up, it was like a small boat being hauled up forcefully.
It was fortunate that Yun Yang's fishing line was made of natural silk.
If it had been any other material, the fishing line would have been the first to give way and snapped into two. The old man's eyeballs were about to fall out of their sockets. This old man has lived for hundreds of years and I've never seen such a bizarre thing. Then, the fish on the surface of the water seemed to have disappeared all at once.
Yun Yang's side quietened down as well, and the old man heaved a sigh of relief. **T. This is normal.
If I can't even catch one, I haven't lost, it's a draw."
Just as he was thinking about it, he saw the float on Yun Yang's side shoot up like a rocket. Yun Yang lifted it up. Immediately, a colorful fish emerged from the water's surface.
A qilin fish.
The old man looked like he had been struck by lightning. This child actually caught a qilin fish. Oh my God, am I dreaming? This fish is too small. Not even a caddy.
What can it do?
Yun Yang tilted his head to study the fish before putting it into his bucket.
Too small?
The old man wanted to cry. Such a big qilin fish was already extremely rare. This old man has been fishing for hundreds of years, but I've only caught one such big qilin fish. As he thought about it, the old man's eyes widened again. Yun Yang's float sank again. Lifting it up, another colorful fish floated up. It was another qilin fish. Moreover, it was twice the size of the previous one. At least 2 caddies. The old man felt dizzy. This world isn't going to collapse, right? Why was the qilin fish so easy to catch?
Once the qilin fish was caught, the others would be frightened and would not eat any bait for at least a year.
Forget it. Forget about the details. It's more important to cast the hook and fish quickly. The old man hurriedly lowered his rod and focused, but his float did not budge. After a dozen breaths, there was another splash from Yun Yang's side. Another qilin fish that weighed more than a caddy had come up. Another one. Another one. Another one. Wow, here comes another big one. This one is about 5 kilograms in weight. What a big fish. It had only been an hour but the bucket beside Yun Yang seemed to be full. It was filled with qilin fish that were still bobbing up and down.
There were more than 20 of them.
The old man was completely dumbfounded. The number of fish that he had caught in his entire life could not compare to the number that this child had caught in an hour. How many qilin fish were there in the entire lake? He was afraid that they would all be swept clean after this. Yun Yang cast the rod again. This time, however, there was still no movement after a long time. The old man heaved a long sigh. His loss this time was inexplicable, but it was a crushing defeat. He had never lost so badly in a bet in his entire life. Just as he was sighing, he heard Yun Yang cry out in shock. The fishing rod was actually flying towards the lake like an arrow. This fellow had actually been pulled away by the big fish in his absent-mindedness.
I'm King wronged.
The old man shook his head speechlessly.
He sprung up and caught up to the fishing rod that was drifting towards the center of the lake. With a flick of his hand, a rainbow-colored fish flew out of the water. Looking at the big fish, the old man almost lost his breath in the air and fell into the lake. Qilin fish. This one was at least 20 caddies. How could there be such a big Qilin fish in this world? When the fish was pulled up, Yunyang thanked him profusely. "Old sir, it's getting late now. Why don't we call it a day? We'll continue the competition tomorrow." The old man almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Continue the competition? Compete what? Chapter 133. Only one day has passed out of the 3 days. Yunyang was rather surprised. "You've admitted defeat already?" This junior had an unfair victory. The old man glanced at Yunyang, his eyes filled with resentment. "An unfair victory? What else do you King want to fight?" The aggrieved look in her eyes almost made Yunyang laugh out loud. "All right, let's go back and have an all-fish feast. We can't waste an entire day's effort." Yunyang was straightforward as well. Since the other had admitted defeat, he had, of course, won. Grabbing the bucket and looking at the Qilin fish that filled it, Yunyang thought for a bit and kept the dozen fish that weighed more than 3 caddies. He then poured the rest of the Qilin fish into the water and said, "This can't be done. You guys have to be careful in the future. Don't let anyone catch you again." The old man's eyeballs popped out of his head and bounced back. Xueqi. So many Qilin fish and this child actually let them all go? Those were all priceless treasures. Treasures that could not be obtained even if one had money. However, the next scene made the old man incredulous once again. In the water, none of the fish that had been released left. They lined up neatly in the water, poking their heads out and nodding at Yunyang. They were actually thanking Yunyang for letting them go? Then, swoosh! All the Qilin fish disappeared without a trace. Other than a string of bubbles, there was no other trace. Yunyang and the old man were dumbfounded. The world was unpredictable and the affairs of the world were mysterious. Nothing was too strange. How could there be such a thing? However, what happened next made both of them even more surprised. Forget the old man, even Yunyang's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. The few large fish that were still in the bucket actually straightened their bodies at the same time, exposing the upper half of their bodies out of the water. They stared at Yunyang with pleading eyes. It was as if they were begging. 2 round teardrops slowly rolled down from the eyes of the largest fish. Yunyang and the old man felt their scalps tingle. Were these still kingfish? Yunyang sighed, his hands gripping the edge of the bucket as he said seriously, "I don't want to eat all of you either, but my physique requires it. So, there's really no other way." The biggest fish tilted its head, its 2 round eyes fixed on Yunyang. It was unclear if it understood him, but suddenly, it swam to Yunyang's right and extended its head, landing its mouth on Yunyang's hand. A ball of emerald green liquid spat out from the fish's mouth onto Yunyang's palm. A huge ball. When the emerald liquid landed on Yunyang's palm, it quickly disappeared as if it had seeped into his body. After the largest fish spat out that mouthful of green liquid, the rainbow-colored luster on its scales immediately dimmed. However, it did not stop there. After brewing for a moment, with a sound from its throat, it spat out another mouthful of green liquid. It was still the same emerald liquid that seeped directly into Yunyang's skin like before. However, after spitting out the second mouthful of green liquid, the 7 scales on the big fish's body seemed to have lost all of their luster, becoming dim and lightless. However, it was still holding on, wanting to spit out a third mouthful. Yunyang suddenly felt a pang of heartache. He quickly stopped the fish and scooped it up, saying, "Enough, enough. Keep the rest for yourself. I'll let you live." With a thought, a ball of air of vitality slipped into the fish's body. With a splash, the fish's body entered the water, but it did not leave immediately. Instead, it leaped up happily and nodded at Yunyang in the air. When it fell back into the water, it swam back and forth. It swam back and forth 3 times, still reluctant to leave. "Go!" Yunyang felt his tone softening. "Don't get caught again." The big fish splashed a huge wave and swam back into the deeper waters reluctantly. Yunyang sighed. When he turned back, he saw the dozen or so fishes in the bucket poking their heads out, their throats making soft noises as they stared at him. They were actually thinking of spitting at him. Yun Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry, but the softness in his heart grew stronger. Placing his hand on the edge of the wooden bucket, each fish spat out a mouthful of air of vitality before sending them back into the water. This all-fish banquet. Forget it. He had already won anyway. The old man watched this shocking and tragic drama of the mermaid on the side, and his eyes were already hanging out of his eye sockets. It was obvious that he was shocked beyond belief, his face blank. How could there be such a bizarre thing in this world? There were only 3 fishes left in the bucket. The old man came to his senses, knowing that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He approached Yun Yang hesitantly. "I say, young friend?" Yun Yang turned and asked in confusion. The old man actually blushed and said, "Can you let these 3 fishes spit all at me?"
Yun Yang was taken aback. Sure. Then, he moved away without hesitation.
The old man placed his hand there. The 3 fishes that were about to spit at him sank back into the bucket with a splash. None of them had given in. The old man looked embarrassed. He had never been so embarrassed in his entire life. F***CK, even the fishes are looking down on me. Yun Yang was puzzled as well, so he tried to persuade the old man. Spit it at him. It's the same, it's all saliva anyway. There were only 3 large fishes that weighed 4 to 5 catties in the bucket. They revealed their bodies reluctantly and spat on the old man's hand. Yun Yang scooped them up and did the same thing, sending a stream of air of vitality before sending them back into the water. Not long after, the 3 fishes had finished spitting, and there was not a single fish left in the bucket. The 3 fishes swam a few rounds in the water and spat bubbles at Yun Yang for a while before they swam their tails reluctantly and swam back into the deep waters gracefully, disappearing. Halfway up the mountain, the surface of the lake returned to its original calmness. The old man sucked in a long breath and exhaled. Suddenly, his expression was solemn as he bowed to Yun Yang and bowed respectfully. "Young friend Yun Yang, I, Ling Xiaozue, am indebted to you today. Thank you very much." Although Yun Yang had already guessed it in his heart, he still felt a jolt of shock when the elder admitted his identity with his own mouth. Ling Xiaozue. This was Ling Xiaozue, the publicly acknowledged unrivaled expert in the world. A personage that shook heaven and earth like a mystical dragon. The mystical dragon soars above the mortal realm, a pot and a sword soar to the heavens. There are countless people in the 4 seas and 8 wastelands, the world's heroes are supreme. The legend of the world, the myth of this world, Ling Xiaozue. Hearing that the person before him was the legendary legend of the world, the unrivaled expert Ling Xiaozue, Yun Yang's expression remained unchanged as he said with a smile, "It's Elder Ling indeed. I've guessed correctly." Ling Xiaozue's gaze was clear as he looked at Yun Yang. At this moment, his entire demeanor, aura, and even his face had undergone a drastic change. His face was still the same, but the feeling he exuded was completely different. "You've explained it just now, so you found me." Ling Xiaozue's eyes were trained on Yun Yang as he said, "But I still don't understand. Everything you've done, and that pot of prime of wine, was it just a test?" Yun Yang chuckled bitterly inwardly and said in a low voice, "As long as there's a 10% certainty, I'll give it my all. Elder Ling should be able to understand now." Ling Xiaozue was visibly moved as he said, "I see." He looked at Yun Yang meaningfully and said, "Young friend, you've lived a tiring life." Yun Yang smiled faintly, his gaze unfocused as he said, "Who in this world can live a tiring life? I've lived a tiring life, but Elder Ling, you're an otherworldly person. Have you never lived a tiring life before?" It seemed like a coincidence that so much information had come all the way here just for a possible guess, but how much planning was involved in this coincidence? It was more than just coincidence, it was luck. Ling Xiaozue exuded an otherworldly aura, but his pair of clear eyes, black and white, seemed to be brimming with curiosity towards the boundless world, just like a child in his teens. It was this temperament that allowed him to aspire to the pinnacle of martial arts. It was also this temperament that allowed him to leave behind so many popular legends, including admiring Yun Zuiyu and befriending Yun Yang. In spite of this, such an otherworldly person, a legend of the world, had once fought against the Four Seasons Tower for over 100 years due to the vicissitudes of life. It had been over 100 years. It was such a legend, the world's unrivaled expert, who could not defeat the Four Seasons Tower even after over 100 years. He could not even harm the tower's foundation. The Four Seasons Tower's terror had risen to another level in Yun Yang's eyes. Still,
These 3 fishes don't seem to be worth Elderling's gratitude, do they? Yunyang asked curiously. As he spoke, he packed up. Feng Mofei was helping to pack up as well.
Right now, Feng Mofei's expression was still that extreme shock. The confusion in his eyes had yet to recede.
Ling Xiaozui. Oh my gosh. This was the unrivaled expert acknowledged by the world. Chapter 134.
Young friend, you have no idea.
Ling Xiaozui looked at Yunyang with a rather complicated gaze. This Kirin fish, the 7-scaled fairy that you speak of, is a gift from heaven. Legend has it that it's a spiritual creature of the divine river, not imbued with any mystical art or power in this world. It can only be caught by fishing. Eating it has a great effect, even a heaven-defying effect, but in reality, it's still far from unleashing the fish's true value. This is because the Kirin fish is born with intelligence. You catch it, kill it, and eat it. The resentment of the Kirin fish itself will be consumed by you as well. This resentment will cause the essence of water soul to be greatly restricted. At most, you can only obtain the essence of water soul but not the essence of divine water. The fish that you caught today, because of my little friend's kindness, the fish returned the favor with gratitude. They spat out their essence to you, and this is the true essence of the heavenly water. It is also the purest water soul energy in this world. Ling Xiaozui sighed. I don't know how you managed to catch so many Kirin fish in one go, nor do I know how you managed to obtain such gratitude from the Kirin fish out of nowhere. To actually make them release their essence willingly at the expense of damaging their foundation. It's been said that there have been people who were fated with this fish in the past, with some fish voluntarily releasing the essence of divine water to the fated person. The fated person became a legend because of the essence of divine water, but to have so many Kirin fish give it to one another in a group like this today, this is the first time in Tianqian continent's history that I know of. It's unprecedented, and I believe that even the future generations won't be able to replicate it. Yunyang's heart skipped a beat. He knew that what he had done might not be possible for others, but he did not expect the scene to be so shocking in Ling Xiaozui's eyes. Of course, this also meant that what he had gained today would definitely far exceed his initial expectations. It would be an astonishing gain. Although the essence of divine water that this old man has obtained is only released by 3 fish and can't be compared to what you've obtained, young friend, it's enough for me to transform my physique completely and even dispel the Kirin fish's resentment. Ling Xiaozui said honestly. To me, this can be said to be the grace of rebirth. Speaking of which, I came here to fish for the Kirin fish, but I never imagined that I would be able to reap such a great harvest. Originally, I thought that it would be a great fortune to be able to catch a single Kirin fish, but I didn't think that my first meeting with little friend would result in such a great harvest. After I transform my physique, my cultivation will experience an unprecedented breakthrough. And this shackle has trapped me for more than 100 years. Therefore, you are fully deserving of this gratitude. Ling Xiaozui spoke solemnly. Yunyang nodded solemnly and said, If so, I shall accept Elder Ling's gratitude. Elder Ling, you only have 3 small fishes, and you can change your aptitude. Then Yunyang expressed his eagerness. The amount of essence of divine water he had received was at least 100 times more than what Ling Xiaozui had received. Since Ling Xiaozui could change his physique, did it not mean that he could as well? Even if Ling Xiaozui was the world's unrivaled expert, his innate aptitude could not be 100 times better than Yunyang's. Yunyang was also a peerless prodigy with 8 innately awakened chakras now. Ling Xiaozui coughed and said with a strong sense of pity, Little friend, it's true that what you've received this time is 100 times more than what I have, but it's also true that your physique is too heterogeneous. Although the essence of divine water can rejuvenate you, you'll be affected by other factors. Let me put it this way. You can basically advance by leaps and bounds when you cultivate the cultivation method of water in the future. However, you'll encounter a bottleneck. This bottleneck will stop you from moving forward. Unless you are able to cultivate all the cultivation methods that are suitable for your physique and maintain the momentum of progressing at the same time. Only then will you be able to advance the water element cultivation method once again after reaching a certain level. Otherwise, Ling Xiaozui shook his head sympathetically and heaved a deep sigh. Looking at a lucky person who had an unparalleled foundation in certain aspects but could only be a mediocre person due to the influence of his physique, Ling Xiaozui could not help feeling that it was a pity. Yunyang's expression did not change. He even smiled, not at all offended.
Actually, I have other ways to help you, Ling Xiaozui said after some hesitation, unable to suppress the pity in his heart.
What is it?
Yun Yang asked. Little friend, your foundation is still shallow. As long as I use my cultivation base, combined with the art of divine ice water that I've cultivated, I can freeze all the other aspects of your body that don't belong to the water element. Ling Xiaozui said, then, you can possess a single water attribute and turn from a useless person into a prodigy. When your cultivation base has improved to a certain level, you can completely assimilate the celestial ice energy I've planted in you. Then, you can turn the frozen portion into a water attribute as well. It's just that doing this will take a huge toll on me. Your future will only be as high as I am now, unable to go any further.
Ling Xiaozui sighed.
Initially, with so much essence of divine water, you can definitely go further than I can now.
What a pity.
This also means that if I were to be frozen by you, I won't be able to cultivate the cultivation methods of other attributes in the future? For example, the cultivation method of the fire element?
Yun Yang asked. Not only will you not be able to cultivate it, you won't be able to. However, your improvement in the water attribute will be extremely shocking. In at most 10 years' time, you'll have the qualification to be ranked among the world's top experts, Ling Xiaozui said.
Forget it.
Yun Yang said, I think everything is fine now. As the saying goes, more haste, less speed.
I'd better not covet that amazing qualification.
Ling Xiaozui could not help being stunned.
Feng Mafei, who was behind him, almost fell into the lake as well. For a moment, both of them could not believe what their ears had just heard. Feng Mafei, in particular, could only feel his head buzzing. To change one's physique, to be a water soul genius, to be as invincible as Ling Xiaozui in the future. You actually rejected it?
Are you still human?
You're already like this, are you still not satisfied? Young master, could it be that you're actually a demon in your bones and want to ascend to heaven? Feng Mafei truly felt that he was not feeling well. Ling Xiaozui was stunned as well, looking at Yun Yang's steady and unhesitant answer, the determination in his tone, and the unwavering expression on his face. With his hundreds of years of experience, how could he not know that Yun Yang was not acting on impulse? It was a decision that had been made after careful consideration.
Finally, he sighed softly.
Yun Yang wore a faint smile on his face. If I give up everything else, I might be able to possess an unparalleled ability in a short period of time. It would be a great achievement for me. But what about my brother's reputation and legacy? They're on me, they're like my brothers.
I won't give them up, even if I die. Even if I'm useless for the rest of my life. Besides, I've put in so much effort to make you owe me a favor. How can I let you repay it so easily?
Yun Yang boarded the carriage and Ling Xiaozui followed suit. Leaning against the wall, he closed his eyes and pretended to sleep, looking content. He did not ask about the bet with Yun Yang, nor did he mention a word about what Yun Yang wanted him to do. Yun Yang did not say anything either. Both of them were silent. Yun Yang was checking if there were any changes to his body after absorbing so much essence of divine water.
Ling Xiaozui was also combing through his body.
This was the most important moment. How could he be in the mood for idle chatter? After fishing for a whole day, Yun Yang, who had just recovered from his injuries, felt fatigued immediately. After all, he still could not use mystical qi while Emmy could not help him heal further due to its previous exhaustion. Once he relaxed, he felt his arms aching. The faint scent of cosmetics wafted over in the dusk. It was the hustle and bustle of the East Bank. Songs and songs could be heard while the lanterns in front of countless brothels were lit. The carriage continued to move forward. Ignoring the bustle outside, Feng Mafei sat on the shaft of the carriage, acting as the coachman. A seventh peak pinnacle expert acting as a coachman, but Feng Mafei did not think it was beneath him. He knew very well who was sitting in the carriage. One was the world-renowned Supreme Cloud, the embodiment of the Empire's loyalty. The other was the legend of this world, the unrivaled expert Ling Xiaozui. Feng Mafei even felt a sense of pride for being the coachman of these two people. Do they think anyone can be their coachman? That also requires qualifications, strength, and opportunity. The 1,000-feet lake had long been left behind. Lanterns were hung high on both sides of the road. Under the night sky, there were crowds everywhere. Looking from this road, Tiantang City's prosperity could be said to be the highest in the world. Feng Mafei drove the carriage in a low-key manner, walking by the side of the road, afraid to disturb the two bosses in the carriage. However, less than 3 miles away from the 1,000-feet lake, a group of people overtook the carriage from behind and stood in front of it, blocking its path. Feng Mafei could not wrap his head around the situation. Did this mean that they had encountered a roadblock? What was going on? Did they want to rob him, rape him, or kidnap him? Do you know who's in the carriage? The leader was dressed in luxurious brocade clothing. He stood with his arms behind his back, looking arrogant and condescending. Sir, please stop for a moment. My master would like to discuss something with your esteemed self. Feng Mafei did not know whether to laugh or cry. May I ask who your master is? Do you know who we are? The man in brocade snorted and said in a displeased tone, Why are you asking so many questions? Ask your master to come out quickly. We have something to discuss with him. Feng Mafei did not want to cause trouble. He suppressed his anger and said in a low voice, Then you have to tell me who you are and who your master is. I can at least have a reason to report. Chapter 135. The corners of Feng Mafei's lips twitched. If it was only Yunyang inside, he might be worried that Yunyang would be at a disadvantage. After all, the other party was a prince. Now, however, Feng Mafei only felt that it was hilarious. He turned to report, Old master, young master, the fourth prince's men are requesting an audience. When the embroidered-robed man heard him say the word request to see, his complexion immediately turned cold. Request an audience? King Hell, who do you think you are? Yunyang rolled his eyes and alighted from the carriage, saying, Ask what's the matter. The man in brocade looked at the handsome young man in front of him in confusion and said doubtfully, Child, can you make the decision? Ask the old man inside to come out. Yunyang had wanted to vent his anger and send these fellows back home in disgrace, but upon hearing the man's words, he turned his head and said, Elder Ling, it looks like you're the cause of this. You'll have to do it yourself. He then turned and went back into the carriage. Inside, Ling Xiaozue looked at Yunyang, amused and annoyed at the same time. He poked Yunyang's forehead and scolded him, You're so bad that you could ooze pus. Yunyang shrugged. Old man, that's enough. Can't you be more reasonable? They're obviously looking for you. Why should I interfere? What does it have to do with me? Ling Xiaozue snorted. Yunyang could only see a flash before Ling Xiaozue disappeared from the carriage. Then Ling Xiaozue's indifferent voice came from outside. What does your master want from me? The man in brocade said, Old sir, you've been fishing at the 1,000-feet lake for the past few days, day and night. We've all seen it. You've stopped fishing early this afternoon. You must have gotten something, haven't you? I heard that you've caught some brightly colored fish. He smiled reservedly. His Highness the Fourth Prince asked me to ask you to share some of the fish with us. What do you think? Ling Xiaozue was dumbfounded when he heard the man. The one who caught the fish was Yunyang, wasn't it? Why does it feel so strange that you're asking me for it? Most importantly, who said that we had a harvest? Those fish were all released, okay? If you had really been paying attention to us, how could you not have seen it clearly? Share some with you? Ling Xiaozue was immediately distracted by the question. No. Old man. The middle-aged man in embroidered robes took a step forward with a gloomy look on his face. You'd better think carefully. These words were asked by His Royal Highness the Fourth Prince. Pah! No one had seen Ling Xiaozue make his move, but the man had already been flung away with a mouth full of blood. The experts from the Fourth Prince's mansion who had followed the burly man here were furious when they saw that the old man dared to make a move. Then, 5 figures flew over at the same time. Then, a series of sounds rang out, and the 5 of them were sent flying back at the same time. The 6 people who had been sent flying were lying on the ground side by side. All of them seemed to be paralyzed, unable to move even a finger. They looked at the old man standing in front of them with his hands behind his back, his robes fluttering in the wind. Their minds were a mess. This old man. What kind of monster was he? Why did he collapse before he could even see clearly? Especially the leader of the group, he was even more shocked and inexplicable. He was a 7th peak expert, the top expert in the Fourth Prince's residence. Against this old man, he still had no way to retaliate. No, Not only did he not have the ability to retaliate, he did not even see how the old man had attacked.
Who was this old man? How could he be so terrifying?
Ling Xiaozui dusted his hands and with a wave of his sleeves, a strong gust of wind blew the 6 people to the side from the middle of the road.
He then turned back to his carriage. Let's go. The carriage rumbled past. On the ground, the 6 people were still lying side by side, unmoving.
After a long time, under the curious gazes of the crowd, they recovered some of their strength and picked themselves up from the ground.
They looked at each other, their faces ashen. Let's go back and report this to the 4th prince. The man in embroidered robes grimaced as he held the back of his waist, one side of his face swollen. A cold glint flashed across his eyes.
Did our men follow them?
They did. Find out which family that old man is from and where the carriage has gone.
The man in embroidered robes looked menacing.
As long as he's still in Tiantang City, what can he do even if he's incredibly skilled? The leading expert's lips moved, but he stopped when he felt a burning sensation on his face.
He had wanted to say that there were some high-end martial artists that a mere prince could not afford to offend, what more when he was only the 4th prince's uncle? Old man, you're not being kind.
Yun Yang looked at Ling Xiaozui in dissatisfaction. Why? Ling Xiaozui asked with a roll of his eyes. Why don't you eradicate the evil once and for all? Yun Yang said angrily, just kill them all, then flash your name and leave. Who would dare move? To add another legend to your legend, to add another legend to this world. What you're doing now is stirring up a huge problem, and then you're leaving all the trouble to me. How can you do things like this? Ling Xiaozui rolled his eyes. What did you say? You want me to go out and kill them and leave my name behind? Let's talk about adding another legend. Anyway, you can carry my banner and do whatever you want in Tiantang City from now on, can't you? This is what you want the most, isn't it? Yun Yang said confidently, as a friend, isn't this what you should do? His words made Feng Mafei, who was outside, perspire. There was no one else who could be so thick-skinned. However, what young master said makes sense. I want a backer like this too. After an hour of travel, the carriage finally returned to the residence of Yun. The men from the 4th prince's residence who had followed them secretly returned to report the matter. Ling Xiaozui and Feng Mafei did not do anything about it. What was the big deal about the report? Set up a banquet tonight to entertain the legend of the world. Yun Yang invited Ling Xiaozui down politely and said, let's not go home until we're drunk. Ling Xiaozui looked at Yun Yang's face with an odd gaze and smiled as he entered the room. It was a strange feeling to be with this child. With my identity, no matter where I go, even if it's the leaders and leaders of the sects, even the monarchs of a nation or the leaders of the martial world's reputable sects, they're all respectful and courteous. However, this child's cultivation base was like an ant's. His status and background were like heaven and earth compared to his own, yet such a fellow was neither servile nor overbearing in front of him. Most importantly, this fellow was definitely not faking it.
He was speaking from the heart, without any falsehood.
It was strange.
Looking at this kid's orderly way of doing things, careful with each step, careful with his thoughts, and outstanding intelligence, he didn't seem like the kind of person who was careless and heartless. Besides, this fellow had never concealed his true thoughts. I'm keeping you here to make use of you. To use your martial prowess, your reputation, and everything you have to gain benefits for me. However, all of this was done in an open and above-board manner. This situation made Ling Xiaozui feel a strong curiosity towards Yun Yang. What gives you the confidence to be able to stand on equal footing with me and stand on equal footing with me? The moon hung high in the sky. Both of them were drinking under the pergola. One was calm and confident while the other was carefree. The content of their conversation was bold and imaginative. It made Lao Mei and Feng Mafei, who were serving and listening by the side, shudder. Young master, what you're saying is, you're facing the world's unrivaled legend. You're a living legend. Aren't you being too casual in front of a legend? Actually, I had a lot of guesses about you before I met you. However, after meeting you, I realized that you're different from the rumors, Yun Yang said casually. What's different? Ling Xiaozui asked with a smile as he took a sip of wine, his eyes filled with curiosity. Legend says that you abhor evil, that you're too high to reach, that you're lonely at the top, and so on. Your title of being the world's unrivaled expert is even more popular, and you.
Yun Yang counted on his fingers as if he was counting his family jewels. Ling Xiaozui shook his head. Legends are legends after all. There must be elements of exaggeration and imagination. Just tell me, what do you feel after meeting me in person? Lao Mei and Feng Mafei's hearts were in their throats. This was a crucial moment. Young master, you have to answer them properly.
After meeting you,
Yun Yang said, I only feel that you're straightforward, honest, and a little childish. You do whatever you want without any scruples. Yet you're able to abide by some things. All in all, after meeting you, I don't feel that the name Ling Xiaozui is that mysterious after all. At least, it's hard to connect him to the legends and myths. Lao Mei and Feng Mafei broke out in cold sweat. He could be straightforward, but could you even use these to describe Ling Xiaozui? Was he tired of living? Why couldn't he be connected to the legends and myths? He was the world's acknowledged unrivaled expert. Wasn't that a living legend? Ha ha! Ling Xiaozui laughed heartily, his demeanor relaxed and carefree. Yun Yang mused, if I'm not wrong, then old Ling's main cultivation method should be related to one's temperament?
Ling Xiaozui pondered for a moment and suddenly shook his head with a chuckle.
I'll say it if I want to. Yes, it's the divine heart of crimson. Although there were some changes later on to complement my physique to cultivate water soul sky split, overall, it's still the same. Yun Yang was hit with a sudden realization. I see. Indeed. A pure and innocent heart, forever maintaining a childlike heart, doing as one pleases, doing whatever one wants to do, free and unrestrained, a heart that is always lively and vigorous. To such a person, playing tricks on him was nothing but a joke, and it might even lead to a tragic outcome. If you want to play with me, then play. If you want to play tricks on me, I'll leave. To be more serious, I'll kill if I want to, slaughter if I want to. Chapter 136.
The so-called masters of the Jianghu don't have to be unfathomable just because they are famous, or they have to be full of charisma, or they have to have that kind of attitude or posture.
Ling Xiaozui looked at Yun Yang and said, remember, if a person can't live out his true self, it's meaningless no matter how high one's achievements are. At least, this is how one feels about this person. Yun Yang repeated the words several times in his heart, feeling that he had understood them very well. If a person could not live out his true self, it was meaningless no matter how high one's achievements were. Lao Mei and Feng Mafei, on the other hand, were drenched in sweat as they listened to him. They felt that Ling Xiaozui's words were like a morning bell that had enlightened them, piercing straight into the depths of their souls. After eating and drinking, Ling Xiaozui finally spoke. Don't hide it anymore. I've lost the bet you made with me. Since I've lost, the wager has to be fulfilled. You can tell me your wager now. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, my wager is to ask you to kill someone for me. Kill someone? Ling Xiaozui chuckled bitterly. I knew it wouldn't be a good job. However, I have to make it clear first. I've killed countless people in my life, but there are 4 types of people that I will never kill. Loyal officials are not killed, righteous men are not killed, and virgins are not killed. Ling Xiaozui said. What about the last type? Yun Yang asked. I won't kill the 4 Seasons Towers men either. Ling Xiaozui said. Yun Yang sat up straight abruptly. You won't kill the 4 Seasons Towers men? Legend had it that Ling Xiaozui and the 4 Seasons Tower had fought for more than 100 years, killing until there were mountains of corpses and seas of blood, but the grudge had never ceased. Both parties were on opposing sides. Yun Yang had even thought of joining forces with Ling Xiaozui to go against the 4 Seasons Tower. If he had Ling Xiaozui's martial skill, it would be much easier to deal with the 4 Seasons Tower. Unexpectedly, Ling Xiaozui had suddenly said that he would not kill the 4 Seasons Tower's men. Yun Yang was dumbfounded at that moment. He was in a bad mood. It was fine if he did not kill the others, but if he said that he would not kill the 4 Seasons Tower's men, why would he spend so much effort to look for him? It would be better if he did not see it and did not fret over it. Did he have to seal the opportunity of cooperation? Was this really a good idea? Due to an incident back then, I went head-on against the 4 Seasons Tower. This confrontation lasted for 113 years. Back then, I killed anyone from the 4 Seasons Tower that I saw. Because of this, I was met with the 4 Seasons Tower's ambushes, attacks, and counterattacks.
Ling Xiaozui's eyes glinted with a hint of reminiscence. No, I shouldn't say almost. I should say that every day, at any time of the day, I'm in the Four Seasons Tower's tight control, ambushes and traps that are everywhere. At that time, I only relied on my own strength to force my way through. Although I was happy to take revenge, although I was in high spirits every time I broke through, although I was complacent because I had killed many enemies, I knew myself the best. Every step I took was difficult and life and death was at hand. Even if one's cultivation is profound and can maintain an endless supply of Xian Qi, the heart will still be tired. There is always a limit to the human heart. Ling Xiaozui said, that period of time was spent in killing. Just one of those days, I had killed no less than dozens of people. When I killed the last few people, I was actually softened. It wasn't that I couldn't kill them, but I was a little tired of it. Of course, this wasn't the main reason I gave up on going against the Four Seasons Tower. Perhaps, from the beginning, I was determined to annihilate the Four Seasons Tower. But I didn't expect the Four Seasons Tower to be so massive. Its power was unprecedented and its organization was so tight that it was unimaginable. Later on, I found two of the four Supreme Lords of the Four Seasons Tower by chance and severely injured them. Finally, the Four Seasons Tower's Supreme Leader came out. It was more than 100 years after I went against the Four Seasons Tower. When Mr. Nian saw me, he proposed a battle without a second word. However, both of them fought for a day and a night without a clear winner. If they were to continue fighting, they would only perish together. There was no possibility of both of them being injured. Finally, both of them stopped. Then, Mr. Nian told me something. Ling Xiaozui heaved a long sigh. What did he say? Asked Yun Yang. If everything went according to plan, Ling Xiaozui had given up on his grudge against the Four Seasons Tower from then on. This was the main point. Perhaps, this was the main reason why Ling Xiaozui had given up on going against the Four Seasons Tower. Mr. Nian said, Brother Ling, I know why you're deliberately going against the Four Seasons Tower. It's because your sworn brother, Heaven of Saber King Li Wujuan, died in the hands of the Four Seasons Tower. That's why you're determined to annihilate the Four Seasons Tower and avenge your brother. There's nothing wrong with this brotherhood. In fact, you've done well all these years. You've even shaken the Four Seasons Tower's foundation. However, you should also know that the reason Li Wujuan was ambushed by the Four Seasons Tower was because he had killed 3 of the Four Seasons Tower's men. We, the Four Seasons Tower, killed Li Wujuan for revenge. If we don't kill him, we won't be able to appease the people of the tower. You killing us is also for revenge. Let's not talk about revenge. Today, I'll only talk about the truth. It doesn't matter if it's your family, your folks, even Li Wujuan's friends and family, or the families of your brothers and friends in the martial world. These people did their best to help you when you went against the Four Seasons Tower. Directly or indirectly, they caused great losses to the Four Seasons Tower. Let me ask you, have we ever gone against any of them? The tower's first principle is to seek revenge if there's a grudge. We'll never implicate anyone other than the victim. This is the tower's self-confidence, and it's also our code of conduct. However, you, Ling Xiaozui, are too strong. You can't be killed by mere humans. Even if we can't kill you, Ling Xiaozui, can't we kill your brothers? Even if we are incompetent and can't even kill your brothers, but are the families of your brothers all peerless masters? If the Four Seasons Tower wanted to make a move, I'm afraid that you can't save anyone other than yourself. Even if you tried your best to protect someone, you could only sigh helplessly as long as the Four Seasons Tower wanted to make a move. But we never made a move. No matter if you, Ling Xiaozui, think so, or if you didn't even think of it, it's still a great favor to speak of this matter. The Four Seasons Tower's first principle is to seek revenge if there's a grudge. We'll never implicate anyone other than the victim. This is the tower's self-confidence, but it's also our code of conduct. However, you, Ling Xiaozui, have killed thousands of our men over the years. That's why I've come out to fight you. However, you, Ling Xiaozui, are too strong. This battle has proven that you can't be killed by mere humans. Therefore, I've decided that if Brother Ling still feels that you haven't killed enough, I'll send an order immediately from this moment onwards. The Four Seasons Tower will launch the most extreme counterattack against Ling Xiaozui. However, the target will no longer be you, but everyone related to Ling Xiaozui. We won't rest until one of us perishes. On the other hand, if Brother Ling thinks that we, the Four Seasons Tower, still have some martial world morality and respect for you, Brother Ling, more or less, then, we'll call a truce from now on and mind our own business. 113 years of grudge shall end here.
Ling Xiaozue sighed softly. Yun Yang sighed softly as well. Mr. Nian's words were too beautiful.
If they were in each other's shoes, Yun Yang would not have the confidence to smooth things over and force Ling Xiaozue to give in. Of course, if the person involved was Yun Yang, he would definitely fight to the end since he had the ability to fight Ling Xiaozue to the death.
If he had to die together, then so be it. Revenge for his brother would be the first choice. So since then, both sides have stopped fighting.
Ling Xiaozue said, I also promise that as long as the Four Seasons Tower doesn't provoke me first, I won't kill the Four Seasons Tower's men.
That's how my fourth non-killing came about.
Ling Xiaozue's clear eyes looked at Yun Yang and said slowly, You're so concerned about this.
It looks like the people you want to kill are the Four Seasons Tower's men. Yun Yang grinned. I can't be sure if the other party is from the Four Seasons Tower. Besides, the Four Seasons Tower's men have always been discreet. When have they ever exposed their identities? How would I know who is and who isn't?
Ling Xiaozue tilted his head and said, Why don't you tell me the name? Ling Xiaozue knew that Yun Yang was changing the topic to avoid saying that he would not kill the Four Seasons Tower's men, but he did not mind it at all. If he could kill one of the Four Seasons Tower's men and return the favor, why not? As long as he did not go against his promise. Yun Yang coughed and said, Actually, to you, the person I want you to help me get rid of is essentially forcing someone against their will. Whether or not the other party is from the Four Seasons Tower is secondary.
Ling Xiaozue was taken aback and asked in surprise, Who is your target? Even I can't deal with him? Yun Yang chuckled.
This person's ability is impeccable, even beyond my understanding of cultivators.
However, due to my shallow ability, my judgment is inconclusive.
Perhaps, this person is incompetent in Elder Ling's eyes. However, I said that targeting this person is difficult for Elder Ling because according to your non-killing criteria, this person has fulfilled all three criteria. Back when the late emperor was still on the throne, he was the late emperor's teacher when he was the crown prince. When the late emperor ascended to the throne, he was the crown prince's teacher again. After his majesty ascended to the throne, he resigned and went into seclusion. Now, he's the crown prince's teacher again. In the eyes of the common people, this person is a loyal official among the loyal officials, the tutor of 3 generations of emperors. Yun Yang said, since he's the tutor of 3 generations of emperors, his age is imaginable. At least, his face looks unusually old, like he doesn't have many years left to live. This person is also a great scholar in the Empire of Yutong, with countless disciples and followers all over the world. He can be said to be the ancestor of Yutong's literati, highly respected. Ling Xiaozue sucked in a breath. Such a person, the tutor of 3 generations of emperors, the leader of the literati, highly respected and should be admired by the world.
You actually want to kill him? Chapter 137. Yun Yang chuckled humorlessly. This person's feat is far from this.
This person has charged into the Golden Palace many times back then, meeting the emperor directly for the wronged officials and vouching for them with his life. He's been extremely supportive towards his disciples as well, fulfilling all their requests. He can be said to be a model scholar, a sage. If anything were to happen to him, there would be countless scholars willing to die for him. There would also be countless high-ranking officials who would stand up for him, unwavering in their determination.
Yun Yang said, That's why I said that this person is a loyal and righteous man. Add to that the fact that he's popular and highly respected.
It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he's a living sage. Ling Xiaozue scratched his head, not knowing what to say for a moment.
This person's name is He Han Qing.
Yun Yang said, I wonder if Elder Ling has heard of this name before.
The expression on Ling Xiaozue's face turned strange.
The shock had disappeared, but what replaced it was an inexplicable expression.
So it's him.
Yun Yang said, So Elder Ling knows his name too. Ling Xiaozue chuckled humorlessly and enunciated each word clearly. Not only do I know him, he's Supreme Lord Spring Frost. Once the last 4 words left his mouth, Yun Yang felt his body tremble violently. Yun Yang could only feel a violent shudder run through his body. For a moment, it was as if thunder had rumbled in his mind, causing his eardrums to buzz. He had only asked casually. His original intention was to test if Ling Xiaozue had heard of this person's name. He had never expected Ling Xiaozue to give him an answer that caught him off guard. With Ling Xiaozue's reputation and status, he would never lie or say anything wrong. Perhaps, for Ling Xiaozue to be so certain, he must have been certain of this and had even crossed paths with this person before. However, a great scholar of his generation, an old official of 3 dynasties, the ancestor of scholars, a loyal and righteous man. Such a person, who was like a sage in this world, was actually full of evil, devoid of conscience, perverse, cruel, merciless, and deranged. Supreme Lord Spring Frost. Thinking back to the Four Seasons Tower's people whom he had met in the past, Supreme Lord Spring Frost would die immediately once he spoke of him. It would be an eerie and horrifying death where his soul would be destroyed and his body turned into a mummy. Then, she thought of the benevolent, senile, and righteous He Han Qing. If nothing went wrong, his name would definitely be recorded in the annals of history, and his name would go down in history. Yun Yang could not help but shudder at the thought of it. Back when I was dealing with the Four Seasons Tower, I had encountered this He Han Qing. Yes, Supreme Lord Spring Frost. Almost all the plots and traps against me were his handiwork. In the end, he even joined forces with another Supreme Lord to annihilate me. Ling Xiaozue heaved a long sigh. I mentioned that 2 of the 4 Supreme Lords were severely injured by me in the battle just now. One of them is Supreme Lord Spring Frost. He Han Qing, with your current shallow cultivation base of course, you won't be able to recognize him. If the 2 of you had crossed paths before, I'd really wonder how you managed to escape from him. You're really too lucky. Yun Yang's hair stood on end as he listened. This He Han Qing, Elder He, was actually a formidable presence who could exchange blows with Ling Xiaozue. He had even managed to escape when Ling Xiaozue's murderous intent was at its peak after an intense battle. He had only paid the price of being severely injured. Elder Ling is known as the unrivaled expert. Could it be? Yun Yang asked carefully. Don't mention the title of unrivaled expert in front of me. The bitter smile on Ling Xiaozue's face was genuine this time. How can I be the unrivaled expert with my insignificant abilities? Has there ever been an unrivaled expert in this world? Ling Xiaozue said solemnly. If there is, the unrivaled expert must have been framed by his enemy. Yun Yang coughed and scratched his head. However, he was inwardly shaken. Ling Xiaozue had said, "This is my insignificant ability." Insignificant? At Ling Xiaozue's level, he would not use such a tone to be humble. There was no need to. Then, what did this mean? When I went against the Four Seasons Tower head-on, I was at most a martial artist with some reputation in the martial world. However, after a few decades of pursuit, I was suddenly crowned as the unrivaled expert of the world. Ling Xiaozue's smile was bitter. Even that poem was written by the Four Seasons Tower's Mr. Nian. The more Yun Yang thought about it, the more horrified he felt. A chill ran down his spine. The divine dragon soars in the mortal realm, a pot and a sword soar to the heavens. There are countless people in the 4 seas and 8 wastelands, the world's heroes are supreme. Such a resounding poem was actually used to frame people? Is it really good to be famous? Since then, the challenges, attacks, traps, and ambushes I encountered were even more than what the Four Seasons Tower had purposely arranged. This is the price of being famous. A person may not be willing to bear it, but he has to. Ling Xiaozue chuckled bitterly. The grudge has been settled, but this title can't be taken down. I can only be the martial world's target for the rest of my life. Yun Yang nodded quietly. The Four Seasons Tower's move was indeed vicious, killing without spilling blood. If Ling Xiaozue's title as the world's unrivaled expert could not be taken off, the turmoil caused by this title would never cease in the long run. The ultimate outcome would still be buried under these 6 words. Beheading the unrivaled expert, Ling Xiaozue. What kind of title was this? Who in the martial world would not want it? Yun Yang thought about it and said, if that's the case, this He Han Qing isn't a man with lofty ideals, nor is he a loyal and righteous man. He's just fishing for fame, an ambitious man who paves the way for the Four Seasons Tower. Ling Xiaozue frowned and said, that may not be the case. He has done a lot of good things for the Empire of Yutong. Although his motive may not be for the Empire of Yutong, it's more to balance the continent situation. The benefits are real. Yun Yang said indifferently. His merits have never been in my eyes.
I only know that he's Supreme Lord Spring Frost.
His lingering blood curse of speech has caused all his subordinates to lose their lives immediately as soon as they utter the word Supreme Lord Spring Frost.
Just this alone is enough for him to die 1,000 times.
Even if he were to die 1,000 times, he would not be forgiven.
Lingering blood curse of speech?
Ling Xiaozui sat up straight, his expression serious.
Has he really cultivated the lingering blood curse of speech?
That's right. Yun Yang thought about it and said, I've previously confirmed and imprisoned a few Four Seasons Tower's men. However, once they uttered the word Supreme Lord Spring Frost, smoke would rise from their bodies immediately, their flesh and blood would dry up. Even their bones would turn into dust. They died a horrible death.
This is the terror of the lingering blood curse of speech.
Those who violate the blood curse will have their souls dispersed and their spirits destroyed. Ling Xiaozui's expression was grim.
Recently, the Empire of Yutong's veterans who had retired and returned home due to their physical disabilities have been disappearing continuously.
9 of them have gone missing at once, Yun Yang said faintly. Besides, the relationship between these 9 people must be very good.
Ling Xiaozui felt his blood rush to his head.
As the top expert of the martial world, a martial arts master of his generation, Ling Xiaozui naturally knew of such a wicked method of searching for people. The spectral path of the soul, the abyss path of flesh. Just the thought of such a wicked method filled him with rage.
There's such a thing?
Yes.
It's because of this that I met He Hanqing by chance.
However, I didn't know that he was the Supreme Lord Spring Frost that I've been searching for.
Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath. It's good that the two are one.
This Supreme Lord Spring Frost's ability is unfathomable. Looking at the entire Empire of Yutong, no one can stop him now.
Ling Xiaozui hesitated for a moment.
A murderous aura rose from him, but it disappeared immediately. He said in distress, But, my promise. Looking at Ling Xiaozui's dilemma, Yun Yang suddenly had a strange feeling about this world's unrivaled expert. Such a person valued keeping his promise more than his own life. Although he was rather pedantic, he had to admit that he was a very adorable person. Besides, Yun Yang also felt that it was because of this unyielding temperament that this person had reached his current martial realm. If he had given up on his beliefs and promises, he would not be so frightening, nor would he be so adorable. Yun Yang thought about it and said, Actually, even if Elder Ling had really attacked, it wouldn't have broken his promise because the Four Seasons Tower had attacked you first.
Attacked me first?
Ling Xiaozui was stunned.
Why didn't I feel it?
Yun Yang rolled his eyes and said, They were attacking someone Elder Ling cares for.
Isn't that a violation of the original promise?
Ling Xiaozui was still puzzled, but he did not interrupt this time, waiting for Yun Yang to continue. Yun Yang did not dally, telling him about the Four Seasons Tower's actions against Cirrus House and the forced marriage of Yun Zuiyu. Of course, Yun Yang had tried his best to be objective when he was narrating, but he had still added in a lot of exaggeration. They knew that Cirrus House was under your protection, but the Four Seasons Tower still did it.
Didn't they attack you first?
Seeing that Ling Xiaozui was still hesitant, Yun Yang continued. Besides, I'm not asking you to kill the Supreme Lord Spring Frost. As long as you beat him up, it doesn't matter if he's severely injured or on his last breath. As long as he doesn't die in your hands, it'll be acceptable no matter what you say, right? Ling Xiaozui's eyes shone as he clapped his hands.
That's right, this is a great idea.
Lao Mei and Feng Mafei, who were standing aside, were dumbfounded. How could this work? Both of them had the same feeling. How could this world's unrivaled expert be so easily fooled? Once the plan was decided, Ling Xiaozui and Yun Yang began toasting and drinking to relieve their boredom, truly satisfying their alcohol cravings.
The feast lasted until midnight.
It was only when Ling Xiaozui was sent to the guest room to rest that Lao Mei asked cautiously.
Young master, you wouldn't have met a fake one, would you?
How could this fellow be so easily fooled? Yun Yang chuckled meaningfully. Easy to fool?
Why don't you go try?
With a laugh, he returned to his room.
Ling Xiaozui was easily fooled? How could this be possible?
The reason that experienced martial artists like Lao Mei and Feng Mafei would have such an illusion was mainly because Ling Xiaozue had already decided to help him from the beginning. First, the lost wager. Second, the kindness of the 3 Kirin fish willingly spitting out the essence of divine water. He had only wanted him to think of a way to give him a reason to attack in a roundabout manner. Of course, when it was confirmed that the target was the 4 Seasons Tower Supreme Lord Spring Frost, Ling Xiaozue no longer had any doubts about this vengeful target. All his inventory had been released at once. He had been writing from afternoon to night. He had wanted to gather 10 chapters, but he did not manage to write that many after all. Still, it was good enough that he had 9 chapters now. A long, long time. 134 chapters. A lifetime. Haha. Tomorrow's update on the 2nd will be at noon and afternoon. Seeking subscriptions. Seeking monthly votes. Feng family's return battle. Chapter 138. I am the Supreme One. My motive for releasing the book on the 1st of June was very simple. I thought that we all have a dream in our hearts, a childhood dream. Perhaps, this dream can only exist forever but cannot be realized. However, the novel has provided us with such a fantasy paradise. We want to fulfill our dreams in the world of the novel. From the beginning to the end, I really did not feel how old I was. My childish heart was beating rapidly. I am actually a rather sensitive person. My threshold for humor is very low. Sometimes when someone farted and I heard it, I would laugh for a long time. A joke, when others were watching it expressionlessly, I could not stop laughing until others looked at me strangely. Speaking of which, it was a little awkward. Similar to my threshold for humor, my threshold for tears was very low as well. I was easily moved. My wife was watching a drama. I was someone who never watched dramas, but after watching it for a dozen minutes, I saw a tragic scene. My tears fell. Then, the couple looked at each other with tears in their eyes. After that, I would always be laughed at. Ah, you actually cried too. At that time, I was too ashamed to show my face. A grown man. Cough cough. Really. In short, my inner emotions have become richer. Hee hee, these are definitely my weaknesses in daily life or work. But for a job like writing a novel, it seems to be quite suitable. Haha. The book will be released on the 1st of June and the 1st of August. As a retired soldier, I have considered the timing of the book's release. To a certain extent, the Yun Yang I'm writing about can be considered a soldier. Therefore, I thought that on the 1st of August, it would be a holiday for myself and Yun Yang. The 1st of August is a military holiday. It is a holiday for all the nation's soldiers. Of course, I thought that it would also be Yun Yang's holiday, the 9 Supremes' holiday. Tai Zheng, the holiday of millions of soldiers. Let us celebrate it for them. Therefore, I chose to release it on the 1st of August. Of course, tonight is our annual gathering of comrades. My new book is released. With my overflowing vanity, of course, I want to show off in front of my comrades. I hope that everyone can let me have some pride in front of my comrades. Feng Ling's pride will depend on everyone. Back to the main topic, the next segment was, of course, asking for monthly votes. I was actually very excited on this day. After experiencing so many books being released, I was still very excited today. It has been 3 years since we last saw this battlefield. The fierce battle of Proud World was still vivid in his mind. But in these 3 years, we were just spectators. The heaven domain is equivalent to me resting for a book's worth of time. Even when the firmament of the sky domain erupted with 10 updates, I rarely asked for monthly votes. Because, to be honest, I feel that I am not very satisfied with the book I wrote. However, I've basically poured all my blood, sweat, and tears into this book. I feel that I've written this book, I'm the supreme being to date, I've reached my peak. Whether it was the investment, the plot, or the characters. So, our Feng clan needs monthly votes again. Do you still remember? Back then, as long as we moved, the entire Qidian would tremble. That's right, we lost more than we won back then. But which of our battles wasn't soul-stirring? Back then, when did we not fight crazily? Back then, which of our battles didn't last until the very last moment? When had the Feng clan ever been afraid? Proud of the world to conquer the world. Now we have returned to this battlefield. The battlefield was still there. The will to fight was still there. Our brothers are still here. Feng Ling was still there. The Feng family was still here. The battle was still here. The disciples of the Feng family, fight the martial world again. Millions of brothers, fight with me. Monthly votes. This will be the best gift I've ever received for the first day. It will also be the best gift that Yun Yang, Tai Zheng, and the other Yutong soldiers will ever receive. That was because it represented their acknowledgement. Asking for monthly votes. I am Feng Ling the world. Opening the path with the explosion of 9 chapters. Opening the stage for the Supreme Being. Come. Chapter 139. It was early in the morning. A troop of men had arrived at the residence of Yun's gate. They were the 4th prince's men. The 4th prince had sent out quite a number of men this time. 500 imperial guards in bright armor had arrived and blocked the residence of Yun's gate with great fanfare. The people who returned in defeat yesterday were at the very front. Although they looked menacing, they did not dare barge in directly. They only waited outside the gate. However, his attitude was clear. He wouldn't give up until he reached his goal. Many people who passed by hastened their footsteps in unison, afraid that they would get into trouble. Those who were more daring only took a quick glance before running away as well. It looked like the residence of Marquis Yun was in deep trouble this time. At this moment, a few irritated voices rang out. Make way, make way! What's going on with this big group of people? What are they doing? Lining up for training so early in the morning? Make way, don't block my way. Even good dogs don't block the way. Am I wrong to say that you are blocking the way? Aren't you all blocking the gate? Why are you glaring at me? Do you believe that I won't? Boss, I'm Dong Tianling. I'm here to visit you. Boss, I'm Qiu Yun-san. I'm here to share weal and woe with you, to share honor and disgrace, to share fortune and misfortune. Boss. The 4 young masters swung their arms and barged their way through the 500 imperial guards to the residence of Yun's gate. The 4 of them were cursing, but their faces were calm, as if they did not care at all. Even if something serious were to happen, could it be that we can't handle it even with so many of us together? Unless the sky was falling. Lao Mei opened the door and looked at the 500 troops outside. He was equally calm, as if he did not see anything as he welcomed the guests warmly. Oh, the 4 young masters are here? Please come in, my young master is not up yet. He drank too much last night. Dong Tianling was curious. Drank too much? Who did he drink with? Who's so amazing? You actually managed to get boss drunk. You must have taken advantage of him while he was still recovering from his illness. What a despicable person. That's right, that's right. Call him out. We have to avenge our boss. Qiu Yun-san rubbed his palms together. How dare he make our boss so drunk that he can't even get out of bed? I'll take him down myself. Let me do it. Xia Bingchuan said sarcastically. Qiu Yun-san, don't get tricked again after drinking too much. We brothers have to clean up your mess. Mother Fastris Kerr, the promised luminary paste still hasn't been delivered. How many days has it been? What happened to the trust between people? Where are the people now? He must have learned something from toying with Qiu Yun-san. Chun Wanfeng added, I'm glad that thing didn't come. If it did, Qiu Yun-san might be toyed with. I'm ashamed to be associated with him. Qiu Yun-san was so angry that his face turned green. Can't you guys get over this? If anyone says another word, I'll cut ties with them. Are you 3 hedonistic playboys addicted to making fun of other people's scars every day? See if I don't uncover your ugly faces in front of boss. The 4 of them entered in a row, arguing noisily. Outside, the 4th prince's men were enraged. Did they not see the menacing presence of the soldiers here? What are you guys up to by having so much fun? Butler May. The middle-aged man who was leading the team said sternly, Please report, Butler. We are under orders to capture the fugitive. Please open the door. Young Master Yun. Do not delay us from capturing the criminal. Fugitive. These 2 words caused the 4 young masters to tremble. Boss was hiding a fugitive here? What kind of development was this? Lao Mei said. I will report this matter to the young master. Everyone, please remain calm. With a loud clap, the door was shut again. The people outside could do nothing but continue to wait patiently. The residence of Marquis Yun was different from other marquises' residences. The residence of Marquis Yun had the Shangfeng sword guarding the residence. If one trespassed and was killed, it would be a waste of time. There was no justice to be sought. In spite of this, they had to do it. "Boss, aren't you awake now? You look energetic." Dong Tianling came over in a friendly manner. "Are you feeling better?" "Boss, this bastard Dong Tianling really doesn't know how to talk. He doesn't even know how to get close to us." "Boss is not only energetic, you're obviously in high spirits and full of energy, as if you've just played with 3 young ladies." Xia Bingchuan said. "You only know about young ladies. Get lost." "Boss, you're getting more and more handsome. Sometimes, when I stand with boss, I feel that it's better if I'm a girl. That way, I can be boss's concubine, so that I don't have to see but can't touch." Qiu Yunsan said. "Boss is the best." Chun Wanfeng said. Yun Yang's face paled as he listened, not the least bit in high spirits. "The few of you, wait a moment." As he spoke, he turned to Ling Xiaozue, who was slowly practicing his martial arts. "Brother Ling, there are people here to capture the fugitive. You, the fugitive, better go and deal with it quickly." Ling Xiaozue was exasperated. "You're the fugitive. Your whole family is fugitive. However, this 4th prince seems to be a little too persistent, isn't he?" No matter how genuine Ling Xiaozue was, or how good his temper was, he was provoked. Dong Tianling and the other 3 young masters were stunned. "The person was in your home. He should be under your protection. Why didn't you say anything about solving the problem? You actually let the fugitive handle it himself?" Dong Tianling's eyes darted around as he said casually, Friend, why don't I help you?" Ling Xiaozue was still fuming, so he replied faintly, "Don't worry about it." He then turned and walked towards the door. The 4 noble young masters were all displeased. Dong Tianling pursed his lips and said, "Boss, who is this? Why is he so arrogant?" Chun Wanfeng replied, "Looks like he's rather arrogant. He thinks highly of himself." Xia Bingchuan replied, "Tisk interesting." Qiu Yunsan said, "I think this fellow doesn't know the dangers of the world. He needs to be taught a lesson." Yun Yang coughed twice and ignored them, saying, Come. Have some tea, have some tea." The 4 fellows wanted to find out about Ling Xiaozue's background. No matter how out of line their attitudes were, Yun Yang could still see through their true intentions. However, what Yun Yang hated the most was playing such tricks in front of him. "If you had asked me directly, I might have told you the truth." However, the 4 noble young masters digging their own graves and waiting for Yun Yang to bury them was something that Yun Yang did not like. If it had been before, Yun Yang would have liked it. However, after being severely injured and being treated by the 4 noble young masters at all costs, Yun Yang no longer liked this method. "I'm not going to explain here." At this moment, a commotion came from the door. Then, Ling Xiaozue, who had gone out, seemed to say something. Then, the other party seemed to be relentless. Thus, an oppressive aura erupted abruptly. Ling Xiaozue had only said one sentence to the leading military officer through telepathy. The military officer was dumbstruck. Then, Ling Xiaozue turned and walked back without another word. Behind him, a few people wanted to rush forward to apprehend the wanted criminal, but the leading military officer suddenly charged forward like a madman, slapping the few fellows to the ground and issuing a series of orders. "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat quickly! Quick! Retreat! You're still shouting, I'll let you shout, I'll let you shout, I'll let you shout." As he spoke, he whipped his assistant half to death as if he had gone mad. When the entire army retreated, this officer took the lead, as if there were a mountain full of tigers chasing after him. He almost pissed his pants and ran back. It was said that the military officer was still terrified when he returned to the 4th prince's residence. Sweat poured uncontrollably from his forehead. The group of people who had left valiantly and returned in a daze were, of course, confused and dissatisfied. Only this military officer was pale, refusing to say a word. Until he saw the 4th prince himself. "Where's the 7-scaled fairy that I asked you to retrieve?" "Why?" The 4th prince's expression was filled with surprise. Everyone's gaze fell on the military officer, their meaning clear. "Ask him. How would we know what's going on?" The officer was still trembling uncontrollably from head to toe. He moved closer to the fourth prince and whispered something into his ear. His voice was so soft that no one could hear what he had said. Then, everyone saw that the fourth prince, who had initially been flushed with pride and looked like he was about to rule the world, actually fell to the ground after hearing the words. His face, which was originally red, instantly turned pale. His eyes were filled with fear. Even his hands and feet were trembling, and his body was shaking like a leaf. The middle-aged man, who was the fourth prince's uncle, came forward to complain, "Your Highness, what's going on? This seven-scaled fairy is related to." "Related my asterisks." The fourth prince suddenly exploded. He jumped up and gave his uncle a good beating. "Do you know how much trouble you've caused this time? I'm dead because of you." After a long time, the fourth prince let go of his uncle, who had been beaten to a bloody pulp by him, and muttered in a daze, "Now, what should I do?" He had completely lost his mind. Thinking of how he had labeled Ling Xiaozue as a fugitive and had even sent men to capture him, the fourth prince felt as if the sky had darkened. How could he have done such a ridiculous thing? Ling Xiaozue was a fugitive? If word of this got out, his reputation as a prince would be forever tarnished. He would forever be the laughingstock of the world. "Your Highness." The leading general took a step forward and said in a low voice, "For now, this apology is a must. Otherwise, there will be no end of trouble." The fourth prince looked panicked as he said weakly, "What should we do?" Before Dong Tianling and the rest could drink a cup of tea, they saw the fugitive return from the door. "Settled?" Yunyang asked, his tone casual. The other party was only the fourth prince's 500 imperial guards. What trouble could such a small number cause to Ling Xiaozue? Therefore, he was not worried at all. Settled. Ling Xiaozue was indifferent as well. There was a hint of helplessness and exasperation between his brows. This was the first time he had come across such a ridiculous situation. "Have some tea, please." Yunyang chuckled. "It's a rare gathering with Brother Ling. I don't know if today's encounter can be repeated in the future. We must enjoy ourselves these few days." Chapter 140. Ling Xiaozue chuckled and said, "Child, if you don't die and can break out of the snare of heaven and earth, I believe we'll meet again one day." Yunyang nodded. "Thank you for your auspicious words. I owe you a favor." Yunyang knew it very well. Ling Xiaozue had truly done him a great favor this time. After today, the fact that Ling Xiaozue had been a guest at the residence of Yun and had a pleasant conversation with him would definitely be spread far and wide. By then, it would be akin to adding a protective talisman to his body. There were pros and cons to this, but at least in the short term, as long as his true identity was not exposed, the pros would outweigh the cons. After today's incident, Ling Xiaozue would definitely leave immediately. Once he walked out of the residence of Yun, it would be harder than ascending to heaven to meet him again. Qiu Yun-san hummed and rolled his eyes. The more he looked at the old man, the more he disliked him. With a slanted gaze he asked, "This is Brother Ling, is it? May I ask for your name?" Dong Tianling, Chun Wanfeng, and Xia Bingchuan glanced over as well. This naive-looking fellow did not seem to be young anymore. Had he lived too long to be an idiot? How could he be so pretentious? Who would not be respectful when they see the young masters of the four noble families coming out? Even if they had something on their minds, they should at least maintain a polite attitude on their faces. Even if it was Keeper Mi from the palace who held power in the imperial court, did he not still have to be polite and not act rashly? Although the luminary paste had yet to be delivered. Cough. But where did this guy come from? His attitude towards us was neither servile nor overbearing. Instead, he completely disregarded us. This attitude was simply intolerable. Even if the uncle could tolerate it, the aunt could not tolerate it. Seeing that Ling Xiaozue and Yunyang were about to bid farewell, he could not help but speak up. Ling Xiaozue lifted his head to look at Qiu Yun-san and the other three men, glancing at Yunyang discreetly. Yunyang lowered his head to sip his tea, pretending not to notice. Ling Xiaozue smiled faintly. "This young master is..." Qiu Yun-san raised his head and said, "I am from the Qiu family, Qiu Yun-san. Old sir must have never heard of me." Dong Tianling stretched his neck. "This lord is called Dong Tianling. Have you heard of this lord?" "Grandpa?"
Ling Xiaozui's gaze lingered on Dong Tianling's face. Xia Bingchuan, I am Xia Bingchuan, a member of the Xia clan. A small clan. Not worth mentioning, hee. I'm from the Chun family. Chun Wanfeng.
Chun Wanfeng smiled reservedly.
I'm just an insignificant nobody. Hee.
The smiles of the four young masters were very fake. There's a reason why we're polite to Yun Yang and even verbally acknowledge him as our superior.
It's not something that an old man like you can belittle.
The four great clans, no matter where they were placed, were existences that could play a decisive role.
Let's see if you're shocked or not. Now that you know it's us, what are you waiting for?
Ling Xiaozui looked around in confusion and said, Spring, summer, autumn, and winter?
Indeed, I've never heard of him. He's a nameless nobody, but he lives up to his name.
The four young masters could only feel a surge of resentment rising from the bottom of their hearts. Ling Xiaozui continued, However, I can still remember a few old acquaintances who are related to the surnames of Spring, Summer, Autumn, and Winter.
Spring Waters, Xia Jianghai, Xueqi Tian, Dong Hanyue. These people happen to be of the same clan as you. Do you know them? The four young masters' faces twitched. Do you know them? Honestly, the four young masters really did not know them.
However, these four names were the old forefathers of the four noble families who were still alive.
Their reputations were well known, but they had only heard of them and had no chance to see them in person.
Yun Yang smiled and said faintly, Brother Ling, don't scare them.
Ling Xiaozui said faintly, They're very bold.
Even if the four old acquaintances I've mentioned were together, they wouldn't dare to talk to me like they did just now.
Dong Tianling felt his scalp tingle as he said, Then, may I ask, Senior?
Ling Xiaozui swirled the teacup in his hand lightly and said faintly,
I'll repeat myself. I've really never heard of the four of your names. However, I'm Ling Xiaozui. Have you heard of me? Ling Xiaozui looked at Dong Tianling alone. This, sir? Have you heard of me? Yun Yang and Ling Xiaozui continued to drink tea facing each other, chatting merrily. The atmosphere was extremely harmonious.
The four noble young masters looked as if they had lost their parents, standing at the side obediently as they served tea and poured water.
Their faces were pale. They had really met a ghost when they went out today. Ling Xiaozui. This fellow was the unrivaled expert, Ling Xiaozui.
Their boss had warned them just now and had even pleaded on their behalf, but they had still offended him in the end. They had brought this upon themselves.
Recalling how he had asked Ling Xiaozui with his neck raised, My name is Dong Tianling. Have you heard of my name?
Dong Tianling felt his sweat dripping uncontrollably, wanting to beat himself to death. Embarrassing. There was no such thing as embarrassing. Offending someone. There was no such thing as offending someone. The moment they heard Ling Xiaozui's name, the four noble young masters were collectively dumbfounded. They did not even realize that the teacup in their hands had fallen to the ground. Each of them had their mouths agape as they stared dumbly at the little old man who was still pretending to be innocent at his age, feeling as if the sky had fallen on them. Ling Xiaozui had even said, I really didn't know that the four noble families of Spring, Summer, Autumn, and Winter would have such outstanding young talents after so many years.
Their courage is commendable.
I must pay them a visit in a few days' time, lest we offend the four noble families and disaster befalls us. The four noble young masters felt their hearts turn cold after listening to his words. If their families knew that they had offended Ling Xiaozui on behalf of their families. If Ling Xiaozui came knocking on their doors, this was truly an imminent disaster, and it was unavoidable. The family leader would probably come out personally to capture them and leave them to dry in the wind, hoping that they would be lucky enough not to implicate the family. The four of them were like four obedient kittens, standing respectfully as they served the young master. Each of them had a teapot in hand, pouring tea and refilling water, afraid that they would fall behind. They were extremely attentive. Brother Ling, forget it.
Yun Yang tried to smooth things over. These are my young brothers. They're young and full of vigor. Who hasn't been reckless in their youth? Besides, it's not a crime to be ignorant. Ling Xiaozui said faintly, I don't blame them. It's just that it wasn't easy for those old friends of mine to make a name for themselves. It's been an arduous task for them to build up their family to where they are now after a lifetime of hard work. Popinjays like them will one day bring real disaster upon themselves. This reminder is still necessary. I'm doing this out of kindness. He smiled faintly.
At the end of the day, spring, summer, autumn, and winter also had a past with me. The four of them looked even more ashen. It seemed that Ling Xiaozue and the four old forefathers were more than just old acquaintances. Were they old friends or even old friends?
Yunyang said, "How about this? Brother Ling, you're a man of leisure. You don't have to worry about this. When I'm free, I'll make the trip on your behalf and it'll be over."
Ling Xiaozue hesitated and said, The four of them felt their hearts skip a beat as they looked at Yunyang expectantly. Save us, big brother. Take it as giving this young brother some face.
Yunyang smiled calmly. "Look at you, I've taken care of your food, lodging, and entertainment when you come here."
You should at least be able to ask for this from Brother Ling, Ling Xiaozue snorted and said. Forget it. Yunyang's expression darkened as he turned to face the four of them.
"Aren't you going to serve tea and apologize?"
As the four of them were about to step forward, they heard Ling Xiaozue say, This old man isn't so narrow-minded.
What's there to apologize for? Now that we've had our fill, coming to Tiantang this time and getting to know this young brother is truly a fortuitous encounter in life. I still have matters to attend to, so it's inconvenient for me to stay here any longer. I bid you farewell now. We shall meet again in the martial world. Without waiting for Yunyang to speak, Ling Xiaozue's motionless silhouette vanished completely with a gust of wind. There was no trace of him left. He had vanished without a trace. Even when Ling Xiaozue's silhouette had vanished, the four noble young masters still looked humble and respectful, as if they were looking at a great mountain. After a long time, Chun Wanfeng of the four noble young masters was the first to fall to the ground. Like a domino effect, the other three young masters followed suit. All four of them were drenched in cold sweat, their faces pale. It was not that they did not want to hold on, but their legs were as limp as noodles. The four of them had similar physiques and similar cultivation base levels. Even the pressure they were under was the same. When the first one's legs could no longer take it, it was a natural chain reaction that affected the other three.
Mother? The four of them cried out in unison as they regained their clarity of mind.
What had happened just now had frightened them to death. The world's first heaven medallion had been smashed by the four of them.
They had brought trouble upon themselves and brought trouble upon themselves. They had dug their own graves.
If it were not for their boss, they might have died here today.
Even if Ling Xiaozue did not teach them a lesson right in front of their faces, as long as he expressed the slightest bit of dissatisfaction towards them and let their families know about it, the four of them would still be killed to apologize to the great legend Ling, to beg for forgiveness and mercy. Thinking of this, the four of them fixed their grateful gazes on Yunyang, each of them teary-eyed.
"Boss, it's all thanks to you this time."
Yunyang rolled his eyes in annoyance and said,
"Now you know what's good for you? Do you still dare to act so shamelessly in the future? Do you think you're so great? Do you think the four noble families are so strong? When you meet someone who's truly ruthless, what you can rely on is nothing." If it were not for today, the four noble young masters would have only scoffed at Yunyang's lecture. At most, they would have agreed to it perfunctorily.
Now, however, it was as if they had heard the morning bell, enlightened and enlightened. No more, no more.
How would we dare? The four of them were ashen. Yunyang looked at Dong Tianling and said teasingly, "This lord, do you still dare to call yourself lord in the future?" Dong Tianling's face was ashen as he shook his head like a rattledrum.
Although the other three young masters were preoccupied, they could not help but burst out in laughter when they recalled Dong Tianling's insufferably arrogant manner just now and his words. Although the four of them had regained their clarity of mind, they were still in a state of shock even after a long time.
Dong Tianling picked up his teacup to drink water to calm himself down and poured it directly on his face. Cho Yun-san was the worst. He looked like his soul had left his body. His entire body was shaking non-stop and the muscles on his face were almost spasming. Rumor had it that Yun Zuiyu was under Ling Xiaozue's protection. Now that Ling Xiaozue had come, he had truly appeared before his eyes. This, recalling how he had once wanted to take Yun Zuiyu as a concubine. Cho Yun-san could only feel the darkness before his eyes. There was no light to speak of.
I've really been blinded by lard. I think you guys shouldn't be called the four noble young masters from now on.
Call yourselves the four courting death. Yunyang smacked his lips, suddenly feeling that this nickname suited these four fellows too well.
Chapter 141. Seeing that these four fellows who were scared out of their wits would not be able to recover anytime soon, Yun began to check on his gains from this trip to the 1,000-feet lake. He did not feel any special changes when the divine water essence entered his body. Perhaps when these four fellows leave, I'll try it in the water and know the benefits of this thing. After all, it was the essence of water and had its own foundation. The real benefits might not be immediate. It was dusk on this day. A few major events had happened in Tiantang City. A man in green appeared at the entrance of Sirah's house as if he had appeared out of nowhere. Yun Zuyu seemed to have sensed it and rushed out to take a look. She could not help calling out in delight, "Brother Ling!" This cry silenced the entire Sirah's house in an instant. Who was this person who could make Yun Zuyu call him Brother Ling? Was there even a need to ask? The universally acknowledged unrivaled expert, a living legend, Ling Xiaozue. "You are." Ling Xiaozue walked into Sirah's house with a smile. His otherworldly aura made those who saw him lower their heads automatically. With a sweep of his gaze, a formless pressure overwhelmed the entire Tiantang city. Watching Yun Zuyu happily bring Ling Xiaozue upstairs, the people below began to whisper to each other. "Ling Xiaozue is here. He's really here." So the legend is true. Ling Xiaozue is really Landlord Yun's big brother. Oh my god! This must be the reinforcement Yun Zuyu has called for. Of course, if I were to be bullied like that, I'd call for help too. She's doing her business here, but she's being forced to marry and become a concubine. How can Yun Zuyu not think of a way to save herself? If I had such a backing, I would have moved out long ago. It's all good now. How did those people force Yun Zuyu back then? Now that her backing is here, there's a good show to watch. Retribution. This is the legendary retribution. Yes, it's not that the time hasn't come yet. Now that the time has come, it must be done. Maybe Ling Xiaozue has received the news and flown here to help. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made such a high-profile appearance. That makes sense. But since he has appeared in such a high-profile manner, then those who bullied Yun Zuyu back then will definitely be in trouble. Let's wait and see. I didn't expect to come to the Sirah's house today. To be able to see the world's #1 expert, a legend of the world. Coming here today is so worth it. My heart is still pounding. Yi Zichin sighed. After more than an hour, when Yun Zuyu reappeared in the hall, the way everyone looked at her was different. If one were to say that they were condescending and covetous before, they were now filled with reverence and fawning. Ling Xiaozue had indeed been paying attention to this place. After a while, boom! A loud explosion shook everyone. A clear and melodious voice said in a clear voice, "The tiny myriad treasure tower actually dares to bully my sworn sister. I also don't know who gave you guys such an outrageous courage, stirring up trouble in front of me. What's the point of keeping this broken building? What's the point of destroying it? Tell the myriad treasure tower lord. Give me an explanation in the pugilistic world. From now on, the myriad treasure tower is not allowed to exist in Tiantang City." The voice was neither fast nor slow, there was no hint of anger in it, but the sense of eeriness invaded everyone's heart at the same time. Indeed, this god had really come to stand up for Yun Zuyu. The entire building where the myriad treasure tower was originally located was actually split in the middle. Half of it was slanted to the left while the other half was slanted to the right. In the middle, there was only a crack from top to bottom, from width to width. The top was about 2 feet wide and there was only a slit at the bottom. It was extremely smooth. Obviously, this crack had been split open by a sword. Everyone in the 10,000 treasure tower was currently standing on the streets outside with pale faces. They were still shivering all over. A few of them were already drenched in sweat. They were working in the building and then the building split open. It was like a nightmare. Some of them were still in a trance, still thinking about the scene they had seen. Suddenly, a green silhouette flew up into the sky. Just as they were wondering what this fellow was doing, they saw a sword light that was like a waterfall, descending from the sky like the Milky Way. Then, two people who were chatting face to face saw each other inexplicably move a foot away from them. Looking down, both of them were standing on the edge of the cliff that was cut by a knife. This feeling was simply a buzzing sound. The hairs on their heads stood up. It was too terrifying, too frightening. A moment later, the green silhouette descended above the imperial city and asked leisurely, Where is Mi Kongchuan? In the palace, eunuch Mi was scared out of his wits, hiding in his room without making a sound. Although he had an extraordinary cultivation base, how could he dare go against the legend of this world? As a member of the Four Seasons Tower, he knew very well how terrifying Ling Xiaozue was. The Four Seasons Tower had long set an iron rule that one should never provoke Ling Xiaozue. If one were to violate the rule, death was death. The Four Seasons Tower would not make arrangements for one's funeral, nor would it seek revenge. Mi Kongchuan was praying in his heart, praying to the gods and Buddhas that he would hide in his room, hoping that Ling Xiaozue would be wary of Yutong's royalty and not threaten him with his life. However, with a loud boom, the walls of the room where Mi Kongchuan was hiding disappeared while the roof above his head flew far away. It flew out for who knew how far, just like a huge umbrella. A clear voice spoke. Keeper Mi is very cunning. Come, 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 eat my sword. Mi Kongchuan fled like a flash of lightning, not even turning his head back as he cried out, "It's none of my business." Instead, he felt a piercing sword energy coming at him from behind. Mi Kongchuan cried out, twisting his body with all his might and somersaulting into the air. Only then was he thankful that he had survived the legendary sword of the mortal world. However, he felt a chill on his shoulder as a transparent hole appeared at the icy spot. His mystical chi was frozen at once. With a cry, he fell from the air. He landed face first on the ground, splashing flowers everywhere with a loud thud.
I'll spare your life this time.
The clear voice in the air said, "Be careful of your wretched life if there's a next time." The silhouette in green floated up as the clear voice spoke slowly. "Your Majesty of Yutong, please do not be angry.
Ling Xiaozue has no intention of going against the royalty this time. I only seek justice. Now that justice has been served, the grudge has been settled. I bid farewell here and wish the Empire of Yutong a prosperous future." The voice faded away.
His Majesty's voice came again. "It's all right.
Since Master Ling is here, why not come down and have a cup of tea?
I shall disturb you if we are fated to."
Take care, Your Majesty."
Ling Xiaozue's voice was already far away.
The next moment, a sudden clap of thunder shook the entire Tiantang city. Ling Xiaozue's voice rang from another direction, "He Han Qing." Then, a loud explosion followed. What followed was a dazzling radiance and a series of densely packed collisions that sounded like a series of cannons. In the next moment, a cloud of black air soared into the sky and spread across the horizon. It seemed to grow in intensity, but the majestic sword light grew brighter and more intense. The black air gradually could not hold on any longer and crumbled. A moment later, the black air in the sky dissipated and the haze was gone. As for the boundless sword light, it was as if a layer of light had been embedded in the sky, illuminating the masses and the world. A long howl rang in the air. "He Han Qing, I'll spare your life considering that you're an old official of 3 dynasties and that you've been kind to the people in the past. However, you must know that the heavens are watching what you've done. There will naturally be someone to punish you for what you've done." An old voice spoke with indescribable agony, full of resentment. "Ling Xiaozue, you've relied on your martial prowess to bully this old man, an old man with 1 foot in the grave. What kind of hero are you? Did you, Ling Xiaozue, rely on this to make a name for yourself in the martial world? Is this how the legends of this world are written? Or are the legends of this world just a joke?"
In the air, a clear sneer rang out. "He Han Qing, say it again if you have the guts. Do you dare or not?"
The voice was filled with an oppressive threat. There was no longer any sound from below. In the air, a long howl rang out. "Don't say the martial world is far away. Who says the secular world is far away? Pour wine on the clouds, and still get drunk. Not bad at all." The majestic sword light soared into the sky once again, reaching a height of 1,000 feet. With a loud bang, the clouds were dispersed by the sword light, forming a large hole. A ball of sword light charged straight into the hole and disappeared without a trace. The entire Tiantang city was silent. Extreme silence, extreme silence, extreme solemnity. It was suffocating. Even those who felt an itch in their throats and wanted to cough were holding it in with all their might. They were silent out of fear. No one dared to act rashly. Today, they had finally witnessed the power of the world's unrivaled expert. No wonder it was said that the mystical dragon was far away from the secular world. Soaring 1,000 feet into the sky and disappearing into the clouds,
It was an unbelievable feat. Was he still human? Perhaps he was already an immortal on Earth now. Why would such a human legend find trouble with old he? Whether it was in the imperial court or out in the world, old he was a righteous man with a great reputation. Of course, he could actually compete with Ling Xiaozue. Although it was only for a moment, his cultivation base was unexpectedly sharp. Was there anyone in the empire of Yutong who could rival him? Could the two old marshals, Qiu Zhenhan and Leng Daoyin, do this? Was the image of the black gas from old he? It did not seem to be a good thing. What Ling Xiaozue had said about man doing and heaven watching, as well as what he meant by unbearable, was unavoidably suspicious and thought-provoking. At the residence of he beneath the intense battle, it was a mess. All the houses and residences had collapsed. The owner of the residence of he, old he, was clutching his chest in agony as he sat in the mess, his face pale. He spat out a dozen mouthfuls of blood, his white beard dripping with blood. It was as if his spirit, qi, and spirit had been sucked away in an instant. The wrinkles on his face had deepened. There was only a sword mark on his chest, but it was a mark that did not even cut through his flesh. However, he Hanqing knew that the severity of this sword wound would not heal without at least 10 years. Within these 10 years, he could no longer use high-level mystical qi. Chapter 142. The first thing is, of course, thanks. Thanks to Sea Soul Robe, Bear Child, Wu Hui, Original Heart, Xueqi, Lewd Emperor family, and the other alliance leaders for their support. Thanks to the brothers who are able to persist in subscribing. Thanks to the brothers and sisters who have been recommending the book. Thanks to the hard work of the managers. On the 1st of August, I was very happy. At the gathering of my comrades, the old captain did not allow me to drink and forced me to come back and explode. Cough, he even wanted to beat me up while holding a glass of wine. The second thing is the monthly rankings. Everyone wants to fight for it. All along, the Feng family has been fighting in the pugilistic world for many years. I have always insisted on one thing. In the book group, review section, and other places that belong to the book, it is not allowed to mention or insult any author or any book. Respecting all opponents is respecting yourself. Everyone should do their own thing. I repeat, all the disciples of the Feng family, stick to our formation. We can be happy, play, and read books. However, those who come to make trouble, we will not tolerate them. Those who come to sow discord, we will not tolerate them. Our results are still passable. At the very least, it is much better than Ao Shurxiejun's start. However, there are still many books that are stronger than us. To be strong, there must be a reason to be strong, and they must pay a lot. I envy and respect the existence of the strong. I will not be jealous and slander them. There are many books that are stronger than us, and I will treat these books and these people as my goals. I will learn, respect the strengths of others, and move forward step by step towards my goal. That is all. War, of course we will fight. Retreat is also impossible. When the Feng family starts a war, we never retreat halfway. This is what I have always insisted on. The third thing, someone joined the group to insult the manager. The insults were very harsh. The manager is a girl, and she cried after being scolded. I cannot stand this kind of thing. Management is the most precious wealth of an author, and also the most precious foundation of an author. After many years of hard work and accumulation, there is such a group of brothers and sisters following them. The manager of the book group does not have any salary, and does not have any income. They are completely free to help the author deal with matters. No day, no night, no day, no night. I can proudly say that the Feng family has a lot of managers. The management team of the Feng family is very cohesive. Any author, any god, to have such a management team is something to be proud of. It is also the dream of any author. So, I cherish it. If the person who comes to scold me is a reader, I can only say that you are brainless. If the person who came to scold was the author, then I can tell you clearly. A person like you is not worthy of making a living in this line of work. 9,000 words were released at the 3rd chapter today. Not too much, not too little. I'm begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. I hope everyone can understand and support me. Thank you. Chapter 143. Ling Xiaozue's strike was extremely sinister. Once he activated his high-level mystical qi, It would trigger the counterattack of the sword wounds that had accumulated in his body and explode within him. This was equivalent to adding a huge restriction to himself. From then on, he could no longer utilize power that surpassed the 8th peak. The mischievousness of the strike made He Hanqing grit his teeth. Ling Xiaozue had definitely done it on purpose. He clearly knew who he was, but he still made a move. He wanted to put him in danger. But could he tell the truth? Once he revealed the truth, he would be the one who would be exposed. Ling Xiaozue had come for He Hanqing, not Supreme Lord Spring Frost. He could only swallow the humiliation and change of events. At the most secluded corner of the residence of He, the ground had been lifted. The 9 people who had been imprisoned within, who had no room to escape, were now freed. At this moment, he was rolling and crawling to escape. Although his body was weak, his desire to live was strong. The moment they saw He Hanqing, all 9 of them revealed expressions of extreme hatred. A few of the guards in the residence of He had just recovered from the shock. Seeing that the situation had changed, they wanted to stop the 9 people and interrogate them. He Hanqing sucked in a deep breath, a sinister glint flashing across his eyes. He sighed dejectedly and waved his hand, saying, "Let them go." This was yet another trap. It was a more ruthless trap set by Ling Xiaozue. Ling Xiaozue looked like he had left, but He Hanqing was aware that he had not really left. He had released the restraints on these people but did not rescue them directly, leaving them here to escape on their own. What was the meaning of this? If he were to silence these people again, Ling Xiaozue would definitely appear immediately to save them. Moreover, he would have a reason to kill him then. Therefore, even though these people knew some of his secrets, he couldn't kill them to silence them. He even had to protect them carefully and ensure that nothing happened to them. Otherwise, Ling Xiaozue would still come to question him. He Hanqing was extremely frustrated about this, but he could do nothing about it. His mystical qi was sealed and his body was severely injured. The spectral path of the soul and the abyss path of flesh were techniques that he could not use before he recovered. Ling Xiaozue, you and I cannot exist under the same sky. He Hanqing spat out another mouthful of blood and stood up shakily. However, he staggered and almost fell. The 9 remaining soldiers glanced at the He residence with hatred, then silently supported each other as they walked out. There were countless guards in the He residence, but no one came out to stop them. Finally, the 9 of them supported each other and walked out of the He residence's main gate. Then they disappeared into the crowd. Those who were fated to witness this scene could not help but wonder if what Ling Xiaozue had said was true. Had old He, a loyal official of Yutong, really done something despicable? Were the 9 cripples not proof of that? Ling Xiaozue had left. Cirrus House's business was booming. Moreover, the customers who came and went seemed to be of a higher quality. Each and every one of them was immaculately dressed, elegant, gentle and polite. Their smiles were amiable. Although the original guests would not do anything particularly out of line, they would occasionally grope the passing maids. But now, all of them were well behaved, even more obedient than children in class. There was not even a situation where they spoke in a loud voice. The 4th prince had become famous. Ling Xiaozue had been here and had done such a great deed. What the 4th prince had done had earned everyone's admiration. To be able to send 500 soldiers to capture Ling Xiaozue and label him as a fugitive. He was truly an oddball. Everyone felt an inexplicable urge to laugh when they talked about this matter. How did such a blunder appear? The crown prince and the other princes were even more delighted at his misfortune. "I've been relying on this joke of the 4th prince to survive these 2 years," said one of the princes. Yun Yang stretched his body and lay in the pond of his home. A sense of contentment rose within him. Yun Yang could clearly feel that every cell in his body was cheering in joy. Finally, he was in the water. He hadn't specifically trained to swim before, but at this moment, he naturally felt that there was no barrier between him and the water around him, and he was completely one with it. He was even more at ease than a fish. Even when he buried his head in the water, there was no sense of suffocation. It was as if his skin could breathe and there was nothing to worry about. Yun Yang began to imagine what it would be like if he were to cultivate his 4th brother's water spirit conjuration. As he pondered, he could not help anticipating it. However, what he needed to do now was to improve the fog of cloud conjuration, mystique wind conjuration, and fiery charm before cultivating the art of crimson devil and thunder crash conjuration to the same level. There was nothing else to be said. Yun Yang understood the principle of not biting off more than he could chew. Although he was already greedy and could not chew off more than he could chew. The fourth prince came to the residence of Yun to apologize, but he turned back halfway. Ling Xiaozue had already left. What was the use of apologizing? However, Yun Yang had become mysterious from then on. Ling Xiaozue had been a guest at his residence, and it was said that they had had a pleasant conversation. Ling Xiaozue had promised to play and fish at the 1,000-feet lake with Yun Yang, calling each other brother and becoming like old friends. Young Master Yun Yang was indeed remarkable. I thought that young Master Yun Yang was only a popinjay, but it seems that he isn't. Seems like what? Of course, he can't be a popinjay. How can a mere popinjay be friends with Ling Xiaozue? That makes sense. Young Master Yun must be someone with great wisdom, hiding in the mortal world to train himself with worldly emotions. I'm guessing that young Master Yun must be an unparalleled expert as well. As the saying goes, dragons befriend dragons and phoenixes befriend phoenixes. How can Ling Xiaozue's friends be ordinary? Not only is young Master Yun handsome, he's also skillful and has an earth-shattering cultivation base. He's so elegant too. Oh, I'm speechless. How can a person be so perfect and captivating? Wake up, brother. You're a man. Even if you like him, would he like you? No matter what, Cirrus House's Yun Zuyu would be safe with Ling Xiaozue's arrival. Young Master Yun Yang, too, would make a name for himself. Along the way, there would be many who would smile at him in a flattering manner. A few days passed and the situation was unprecedentedly peaceful. During this period of time, Yun Yang went into closed-door cultivation. Whether it was the invitation from Cirrus House or other noble families, or the visit of the four noble young masters, he rejected all of them. He cultivated in silence. Since the day Qin San had brought the 9 remaining soldiers to the residence of Yun to express his gratitude, Yun Yang could temporarily be at ease about the spectral path of soul and abyss path of flesh. Now, however, Eunuch Mi was deep in the palace and old He and He Hanqing were still not people he could handle, despite being severely injured. There were no other clues. Naturally, Yun Yang placed all his focus on improving his ability. Old Marshal Qiu Zhenhan sent someone to ask about it and did not come again. Instead, it was Tai Zheng who came a few times to leave a message for Marquis Yun. Take care of my son for me. Marshal Tai ran back and forth, but he did not see Yun Yang. Yun Yang's diligence in cultivation during this period of time had reached an insane level. It was because a brewing storm was already on its way and was about to descend. It was less than a month away from Tai Zheng's wedding. Some of the generals from various countries who had set off earlier had already entered Yutong's territory. The famed generals from various countries had gathered in Tiantang City. How could it be quiet when these people were together? By then there would be a storm. Yun Yang's diligent cultivation was to prepare himself to face all of this. Finally, the 15th of September arrived. Yun Yang had come out of his closed-door cultivation because he had no choice but to do so today. There was someone who had been waiting for him in the residence of Yun for 3 days. This person's identity was unique. Very unique. Oh, isn't this Sister Lingxiu? How does Sister Lingxiu have the time to visit my humble residence? Your presence brings light to my humble abode. It's my honor. Yun Yang greeted her with a friendly smile. In front of him, a young girl in a tight outfit sat upright. This young girl was dressed in black, and although she wasn't an outstanding beauty, she was extremely delicate and pretty. Her entire body carried a bone-chilling aura, like a snow lotus in a world of ice and snow, icy cold that seeped into one's bones, elegant and beautiful. She was tall and slender, exuding an indescribable aura of heroism. She had a pair of sharp brows that were rarely seen on a woman's face. Although she was a woman, just by sitting there, she gave off the aura of a great general who wielded authority and commanded thousands of soldiers and horses. A murderous aura naturally flowed between his brows, making him look extremely awe-inspiring. Shangguan Lingxiu. This was a person that Yun Yang could not afford to ignore nor disrespect. Shangguan Lingxiu was only 20 years old, only half a year older than Yun Yang. However, her family background was one that all the empire of Yutong's subjects would revere. The Shangguan family of generals. The stars in the night worshipped the Big Dipper. The generals of the world respected the Shangguan. The 3 brothers of Shangguan Lingxiu's great-grandfather had once dominated the battlefield, invincible. The three brothers had even served as the Empire of Yutong's East, West, and West Marshals respectively. The brothers had 3 marshals and the father and son had 10 generals. Back then, the Shangguan family alone had supported the entire board of Yutong's military. However, these 3 old generals without exception, all died on the battlefield in their twilight years, and their corpses were buried on the battlefield. The youngest one was already 58 years old when he perished on the battlefield. After that, the 9 brothers of Shangguan Lingxiu's grandfather's generation had perished in the eastern border, one after another. When it came to Shangguan Lingxiu's father's generation, the Shangguan family had even more men, a total of 36 uncles and brothers. They were known as the Shangguan 36 Tiangang Tiger Generals. However, all of them had perished on the battlefield during the Empire of Yutong's foreign wars. When 13 of them had perished, they had yet to marry. Shangguan Lingxiu was the youngest girl in the Shangguan family. She had 2 older brothers and 28 cousins who had perished on the battlefield in the War of Resistance against the foreign invasion 5 years ago. None of the men had survived. No matter what kind of war the Shangguan family had been through, not a single member of the Shangguan family had surrendered. Not a single one of them had escaped. They had all been killed in the war against the foreign enemies. The Shangguan family's blood had been splattered all over the Empire of Yutong. Now the Shangguan family of generals, which had once prospered and intimidated the world, was left with a family of widows and orphans. Among the younger generation, there was only Shangguan Lingxiu, a lady, and 6 children who were only 9 and 4 years old. They were all Shangguan Lingxiu's nephews. The youngest one was even a posthumous child. His Majesty the Emperor had once written, "A family of loyal martyrs, the Shangguan family of generals." Chapter 144. Ever since all the adult men in the Shangguan family had died in battle, there had been no movement from them. The elders, women, and children had only stayed at home to teach the young children, to practice martial arts and study, hoping that one day, they would fight on the battlefield again and rebuild the family's reputation. It looked like the Shangguan family would be quiet for the time being, at least. However, once something happened to old Mistress Shangguan, even the current emperor would not dare neglect it and would treat it with caution. Shangguan Lingxiu, who was in front of Yun Yang, was the person who held the Shangguan family of generals' younger generation. Like her name, this woman was extraordinarily beautiful and well-versed in worldly affairs, but she did not go out easily. However, since she had come to the Yun residence to look for Yun Yang today, there must be something that Yun Yang could not ignore and that he had to show himself. It was not for anything else but the name of the Shangguan family of generals alone that Yun Yang was naturally filled with respect and could not refuse. Young brother Yun. Shangguan Lingxiu smiled faintly and said, "My purpose of coming here is to ask young brother Yun to introduce me to Ling Xiaozue, Master Ling." Her words were laced with an obvious militaristic aura. They were clean and direct, going straight to the point without beating around the bush. "Ling Xiaozue?" Yun Yang said, "He has left. I wonder what Sister Lingxiu wants to see Ling Xiaozue for? Can you explain it to me? Let's see if I can be of help." It was unreasonable to probe into other people's affairs, but Shangguan Lingxiu hoped to contact Ling Xiaozue through him. No matter how much Yun Yang believed in the Shangguan family's style, he had to clarify the other party's intentions before deciding whether to help. Shangguan Lingxiu said in a low voice, "Even if young brother Yun didn't ask, I would have said it. My nephew has 3 innately awakened 8 chakras. I want to try my luck and see if one of them can catch Master Ling's eye and enter his tutelage. If this can be done, the Shangguan family will have a few experts in the future. They'll have an additional ability to protect themselves when they go on the battlefield in the future," Shangguan Lingxiu said with a lowered brow. Speaking of the ability to protect themselves, Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but lower her head. Yun Yang was shocked. "Go on the battlefield in the future? How old are they? Why are you talking about galloping on the battlefield?" Shangguan Lingxiu said proudly, "The 3 nephews I mentioned earlier are already 6 years old. The Shangguan family is born for the battlefield. We live for war. The sons of the Shangguan family step onto the battlefield at the age of 15. Serve the country and defend against foreign enemies." Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. He was only 6 years old, but he was already planning to go on the battlefield and kill enemies for his country. However, everyone in the Shangguan family was happy to see this happen.
They even instinctively thought that it was a matter of course. It's a pity that Master Ling has already left. I don't know where he went either. It's hard to find him. Yun Yang shook his head and sighed, an inexplicable feeling welling up in his heart. How much had the Shangguan family of generals sacrificed for the sake of a family of loyal martyrs? How much more do I have to pay?
It was as if in the stubborn hearts of this family, a man should go to the battlefield and return with his dead body on the battlefield. This was a respectable family. Yet, it was also a family of great sorrow.
Shangguan Lingxiu looked dejected as she murmured, "Actually, I'm only here to try my luck."
Even if I did see him, Master Ling might not be willing to accept a descendant of such a family who carries a blood feud with him as a disciple.
My original intention was only for these young brothers to go on the battlefield in the future. Shangguan Lingxiu sighed softly and stood up. Young brother Yun, thank you. Farewell. She had told him everything and left immediately if it did not work out. Yun Yang could not help saying softly, "Actually, these young brothers don't have to go to the battlefield in the future." With her back facing Yun Yang, Shangguan Lingxiu said faintly, "Generations of the Shangguan family have perished on the battlefield. If they don't go to the battlefield to kill their enemies, who will be the one to avenge the blood debt of their ancestors? This is the mission of the Shangguan family's men. It's their destiny." Yun Yang was stunned when he heard what Shangguan Lingxiu said. The Shangguan family's men have died on the battlefield. Whether they've been framed, ambushed, or killed in a direct confrontation, it's the destiny of a soldier. There's no regret. We won't seek revenge outside of the battlefield, lest we humiliate our ancestors' noble name. However, this blood debt still exists. Since it exists, let it be settled on the battlefield. Before the two armies, a life for a life. Use the enemy's blood and lives to wash away this grudge and avenge our ancestors. Shangguan men are born for the battlefield, live for the war, die for the country, and die for the people. Shangguan Lingxiu said vehemently, "This is the family motto of the Shangguan family. Born for the battlefield, live for the war, die for the country, die for the people." Yun Yang repeated the words in a murmur. This was the family motto of the Shangguan family of generals. Watching as Shangguan Lingxiu turned to leave, the tall silhouette of a girl was obviously graceful, but the young lady of the Shangguan family had exuded a domineering aura. Her steps were firm. Once she started, she did not turn back. She was only a young lady of 20 years of age, but she exuded a steely coldness. "Sister Lingxiu," Yun Yang could not help calling out. "What is it?" Shangguan Lingxiu turned to look at Yun Yang and suddenly smiled. "I'm leaving." She turned and waved. "If Sister Lingxiu's original intention is to let your nephews cultivate mystical qi to enhance their abilities and protect themselves, you don't have to look for Ling Xiaozue," said Yun Yang. "I have some methods here as well." With her back facing him, Shangguan Lingxiu shook her head and said, "We have cultivation methods too, we know each other. The real reason I'm looking for Ling Xiaozue isn't for any cultivation method, but to find a support for my nephews that can protect their lives. That's all. The so-called reason is only an excuse." Shangguan Lingxiu smiled sadly. "The men of the Shangguan family will never return once they go to the battlefield. We've known this for a long time. It's an irreversible fate. No enemy dares to let the descendants of the Shangguan family of generals grow at ease." Although all the generals in the continent respect and admire the Shangguan family of generals, the descendants of the Shangguan family will only suffer worse once they go to the battlefield. No country's military hopes for the Shangguan family of generals' revival. Shangguan Lingxiu said calmly, "When my nephews go to the battlefield, that's when they die. However, our mission is on the battlefield. We can't not go, we're destined to go. That's why I've looked for Ling Xiaozue today, hoping to ask for a talisman for my nephews. Although I know that the enemies on the battlefield may not be willing to acknowledge this talisman, I still want to try. However, Master Ling's absence proves once again that this is the fate of the Shangguan family's men." "Thank you, young brother Yun." Shangguan Lingxiu strode away. Her long silhouette disappeared before Yun Yang's eyes. Yun Yang was still in a daze, his thoughts unsettled for a long time. The autumn wind howled above Tiantang City. At this moment, the backyard of the Shangguan clan was bustling with activity. It was a small drill ground. An old woman with a head full of white hair stood coldly by the side of the drill ground with her arms behind her back,
watching the movements within without missing a single detail.
6 children stood in a row in the drill ground. The oldest looked to be in his teens while the youngest was no more than 5 or 6 years old. They were all young children.
The group of children were in a horse stance, and at this moment, every one of them was already drenched in sweat. Steam was rising from their bodies, and their sweat had already soaked the ground beneath their feet, but they were still doing their best to persevere. Their tiny bodies were already struggling as they swayed. The eyes of the younger ones were filled with tears, big droplets of sweat rolling down their cheeks, but they kept their mouths shut, unwilling to cry out loud. Hold on.
The old mistress's gaze was cold, ignoring the pathetic state of her grandchildren.
Finally, a child's body swayed and fell to the ground with a thud.
Then he fainted.
Drag him away,
the old mistress hollered.
Plop, plop.
After a while, the other children fainted as well, unable to take it anymore. Rest for a quarter of an hour. We'll begin the horse archery training after that.
The children who had rested regained some of their strength and climbed onto the horses' backs agilely.
Gritting their teeth, they bounced up and down on the horses' backs, performing all sorts of movements. They slanted from the horse's back, crawled under the horse's belly, flipped onto the horse's back from the other side, and drew their bows immediately. There were a total of more than a dozen movements, and they continued to repeat them over and over until the steed could no longer hold on, but the 6 children did not stop. However, these children had already used up too much energy when they were squatting in the horse stance, so how much could they recover after a quarter of an hour of rest? They were already exhausted after struggling to hold on for so long, and they were only relying on one breath to hold on. Even with this breath, they were out of breath.
Finally, one of the youngest children suddenly swayed and fell off the steed.
This slip was different from before. A slip in the horse stance would at most cause one to fall to the ground, but when one fell from the horse under one's crotch was still moving freely. The danger level had increased exponentially. The warhorse's hooves were about to step on the young body due to its uncontrollable movements.
Don't move,
the old mistress bellowed. Those who were about to rush out to rescue the child immediately stopped in their tracks. They could only look at the scene with worried eyes.
The eyes of a few noble women at the side were already red, tears welling up in their eyes.
The child who fell from the horse twisted his body with all his might, struggling to move a little on the ground.
The horse's hooves almost brushed past his face as he fell to the ground with a thud.
However, the other horses were already charging over. Chapter 145. The child could not even stand up in time and could only roll on the ground. His reaction was pure instinct. It was an instinct to avoid danger and seek survival. The 6 horses brushed past him as the crisis was finally averted.
It was only then that the child spun and stood up from the ground.
Just as he stood up, his vision darkened and he fell to the ground once more.
The extreme escape from the life and death juncture just now had only been completed by stimulating all of his potential.
Now that the crisis was over and he stood up, he could no longer hold on and fainted.
Wake him up.
The old mistress was furious. How can he faint at a time like this? Wake him up with cold water. Practice again.
A noble woman beside her could no longer hold it in and pleaded, Granny, please, let them rest.
Xiao Wu'er, he's only 6 years old. On the other side, Shangguan Lingxiu bit her lips tightly.
There was only a hard expression on her face, devoid of the gentleness of a woman.
Sigh. The old mistress closed her eyes, feeling a pang of sourness in her heart. Her heart that had never wavered finally softened this time.
Why don't we?
Just as the old mistress spoke, Shangguan Lingxiu hollered, No! No rest. No one can rest until it's time.
Her voice was resolute, leaving no room for discussion.
Lingxiu.
The middle-aged lady beside her was spitting fire.
Are you trying to torture them to death? Shangguan Lingxiu bit her lips tightly. This small drill ground has existed in the Shangguan family for more than 70 years. For more than 70 years, the men of the Shangguan family have all trained their martial skills here before they fight in the battlefield.
I was born late, so I didn't have the fate to see my grandfather training here. Shangguan Lingxiu said loudly, but I've seen my father and uncles training here.
Training here. I've also seen my brothers running around here, gritting their teeth and bleeding, training themselves since they were 3 or 4 years old. Each of them gave it their all really.
Shangguan Lingxiu said loudly, But even though they fought so hard, they still died in the battlefield. The intensity of my training now is only slightly higher than when I was your age. It's still far from enough. I'd rather see them die in this small drill ground than to see them fall on the cold battlefield under the hooves of the enemy's horses. If they become our enemies, they will be promoted to nobility. Continue. Continue practicing. If it's not time, you can't rest even if you die. There's no mercy for anyone. All of you, continue practicing. Shangguan Lingxiu's pretty face was flushed, her gaze like a burning flame. Quickly, or I'll whip you. Under the urging of the whip, the 6 children once again climbed up the horse shakily. Gritting their teeth, they continued to practice the various movements. This is the Shangguan family of generals. Shangguan Lingxiu hollered, "This is how children of the family of generals are. Either you step on your enemies' corpses and carry your enemies' heads to revive the Shangguan family of generals' glory. Otherwise, you will fall under the enemy's blade and become their meritorious service. This is the fate of the Shangguan family of generals' men. There is no other way." The shrill cry was sharp and ear-piercing in the autumn wind, making the whistling autumn wind even colder. It was evening in the afternoon. Shangguan Lingxiu brought her nephews out, remaining silent along the way. The further they went, the more secluded it became. Finally, the group of aunt and niece arrived at a chaotic place. This was the red light district of Tiantang City. Countless gangsters, rogues, villains, and fugitives gathered here to survive in this dirty and dark place. In other words, this was an abandoned land. There was almost no one here during the day. It was quiet and deserted. However, when night fell, all sorts of monsters seemed to emerge from the ground. The place was bustling with noise. Some were drinking, some were cursing, some were fighting, and some were grabbing a girl on the street. Twisted faces could be seen everywhere in the dim light, menacing, horrifying, and cruel. A burly man stood up shakily and grabbed a woman with unkempt hair and a dirty face. "Ha ha ha! Come here, play with this lord." Before he could grab it, a small figure suddenly appeared. Then, the burly man's stomach was punched with a bang. "Little bastard! How dare you hit your father? You're looking for death." The man felt as if his intestines had been punched out. Amidst the excruciating pain, he was enraged and began to retaliate mercilessly with punches and kicks. The little figure fighting him was only 5 or 6 years old. She nimbly dodged, jumped, and evaded the opponent's attacks. She seized every opportunity to strike. Her seemingly small and delicate fists were actually quite powerful. She struck repeatedly, causing the burly man to scream in pain. It seemed like the winner was clear, but the man was an adult after all. If a punch or kick landed on the child would not be able to withstand it and the outcome would be reversed. Even though he had gone through extremely strict training, he was only a 6-year-old child after all. Bang! With a cry, the child could not dodge in time and was kicked in the stomach by the man. His tiny body flew 30 feet away and fell to the ground, unable to get up immediately. The man charged forward again with a menacing grin, obviously intending to kill the child. In this world, the so-called kindness, conscience, and compassion were all empty words. The old, the weak, the women, and the children were all weaklings and would only become sacrificial victims. The strong men who had the upper hand would only cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, completely eliminating any potential disaster that might have sprouted. Shangguan Lingxiu clenched her teeth, her body trembling, but she did not move. She only watched the situation unfold with widened eyes. Seeing the man approaching, the child on the ground rolled with effort and stood up, clutching his stomach, his forehead already beaded with sweat. The burly man grinned and pounced on him fiercely, wanting to kill him. However, the child suddenly roared and dodged. Then, he jumped up high and stabbed his 2 fingers into the burly man's eye sockets. With an earth-shattering howl, the man pummeled the tiny body hanging on his body. The child let out a series of miserable screams, but he once again fiercely leaped up, his mouth of baby teeth fiercely biting the burly man's throat. Fresh blood immediately gushed out. The man screamed in terror, but his voice had already changed. His burly body fell down powerlessly. His thick and sturdy body only twitched for a moment before it stopped moving. His lower body was quickly soaked in crimson blood. The corpse, which had already returned to silence, suddenly moved again. A small head crawled out from under the corpse. Its head, face, and body were covered in blood. It was panting heavily, and its small body was even shaking from time to time. Obviously, the child had won this battle, but the price he had paid was not small. It was far beyond what a 6 or 7-year-old child could and needed to bear. Just as the child's panting subsided, he puffed out his chest and raised his hand, enduring the pain in his body. "I've won." The child had long understood his fate. There was no such thing as childhood for the Shangguan clan's men. There was only life and death, victory and defeat. Tears streamed down Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes as she bent down and opened her arms to welcome her nephew's triumphant return. In the dark, she hugged her nephew's trembling body tightly. "Well done. Third boy, you're a good boy. You're my pride." Shangguan Lingxiu's voice was choked. "My surname is Shangguan. My name is Shangguan Long Tao, not third boy." Third boy leaned into his aunt's embrace and murmured, "I'm a Shangguan man, Shangguan Long Tao." Before he could finish, he fainted. The brutal battle just now was too cruel for a child who was only 7 years old. He had used up all his strength and was severely injured, but he still wore a proud expression on his face as he fainted. "I've won. I'm Shangguan Long Tao. I'm a descendant of the Shangguan family of generals." Next, Shangguan Lingxiu wiped her tears away forcefully. Late at night, Shangguan Lingxiu brought her 6 injured nephews to the west of the 1,000-feet lake, to the mass grave. Ghostly flames flickered, rising and falling. "Sleep here if you're tired." Shangguan Lingxiu's expression was cold. "The mound of the grave can't be used as a pillow. Sleep with your head down and your feet on the mound." However, no matter how tired they were, how could the children fall asleep in such a mass grave? What kind of courage would they have to fall asleep in such an environment? All of them cowered as they looked at their surroundings, their eyes filled with fear. "And I'm so scared." The youngest child tugged at Shangguan Lingxiu's sleeve and begged pitifully, "Let's go home." "No." Shangguan Lingxiu said resolutely, "The children of the Shangguan family of generals can't be afraid. We're not even afraid of the living. Why should we be afraid of the dead?" "Right here, separate," Shangguan Lingxiu said sternly. "Keep a distance of 5 steps between each of you. Don't get too close to each other. Do you hear me? Don't get too close to each other. Both of you will be punished if you get too close to each other." The 6 children were separated just like that. After separating the 6 nephews, Shangguan Lingxiu hid behind a tombstone as well, watching her nephew's movements carefully. On the other side, the 6 children were still sobbing in fear. Suddenly, one of the children stood up. "I can't sleep. I'll do some boxing." Whoosh whoosh whoosh. He actually began to practice. 1 punch and 1 kick, he practiced methodically. The other children's eyes lit up. "Let's practice too." The 6 children danced in the mass grave, each with their own style. Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes were wet as she watched the scene unfold. Then, she squatted down slowly and wrapped her clothes tightly around her eyes peeking around in fear. This heroine who looked fearless was now trembling all over. Chapter 146. Shangguan Lingxiu paled from the fright, but she forced herself to endure it. Compared to her 6 nephews, she was even more fearful of the mass grave. No matter how valiant and heroic Shangguan Lingxiu appeared to be, she was still a girl. Faced with the howling autumn wind that sounded like the cries of ghosts and the rats that wandered in and out of the bushes, even the slightest change could scare her. As a girl, no matter how hard she pretended to be strong and cool, her cowardly nature could not be changed. Humans were strange creatures. The more cowardly one was, the more one dared not close one's eyes. The more one would pay attention to the slightest movement around them, only to further frighten oneself. Rustling noises could be heard. Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes widened in fear as she watched a small round thing slowly walk towards her from the bushes. She felt her entire body stiffen. Her mouth was agape, her pretty face already pale with fright. As the movement approached, her breathing became more and more rapid. Her hands clutched the front of her shirt tightly, almost fainting from the fright. Finally, a porcupine crawled out from the bushes. Shangguan Lingxiu heaved a sigh of relief and could not help patting her chest. Compared to the rats, the porcupine was much cuter. However, at this moment, she clearly heard a long sigh from beside her.
Shangguan Lingxiu felt goosebumps all over her body.
She knew that she had not heard it wrongly. Indeed, there was something beside his ear, letting out a faint sigh. This was a mass grave. Who else could be sighing in the middle of the night?
Shangguan Lingxiu was on the verge of breaking down. She nervously stood up, only to feel that her whole body was drenched in cold sweat. Her clothes had long been soaked, but she still insisted on looking at the location of her 6 nephews first to make sure that they were safe. However, when she saw that she could still hear the wind from her fists, she couldn't help but calm down, and the fear from before instantly disappeared. However, another sigh sounded in his ears. The nightmare came again. Shangguan Lingxiu yelped and jumped away instinctively, feeling her body go limp. You. He was so scared that his teeth were chattering, and he couldn't even speak clearly. She could only hear someone speaking from behind her. Why are you doing this? It spoke. The ghost spoke. There was really a ghost. Shuddering, Shangguan Lingxiu leaped 8 feet into the air and spun around in the air. Finally, she saw an elegant silhouette standing on top of the tombstone that she had been hiding in just now. In the dark of the night, the shadow looked even more shapeless, swaying as if its body was contorting at any moment. Ghost. Ghost. There's really a ghost. Shangguan Lingxiu was hovering in the air. In her panic, she was so frightened that she forgot to channel her mystical qi. She plummeted from the sky like a weight. However, she was now 8 feet in the air. If she were to fall, she would be gravely injured. The silhouette on the tombstone sighed again and floated, catching Shangguan Lingxiu in his arms. If he did not catch her, this heroine of the Shangguan family of generals would definitely be injured, even if she did not fall to her death. She had actually forgotten to circulate her mystical qi in midair. How unimaginable! Let go of me! Shangguan Lingxiu screamed instinctively. She was truly frightened, activating her female concealment skill. It's me. Yunyang rubbed his nose helplessly. With this little bit of courage, he was not even as big as a sesame seed. He actually dared to bring 6 children to the mass grave to practice. He had to admit defeat. The 6 children were not so afraid, but the one who had brought them here was paralyzed with fear. Yes. Shangguan Lingxiu closed her eyes as she punched and kicked Yunyang for a while. Only then did she feel that the voice was familiar. She tried to open her eyes, but all she could see was a helpless handsome face before her. Even his hair was messed up from her clutches, looking helpless as he stared at her helplessly. Who else could it be if not Yunyang? It's you? Shangguan Lingxiu felt her courage returning at once. She was rejuvenated, the anger on her face disappeared and was replaced by an icy coldness. Put me down, she cried. Yunyang put her down, speechless. Shangguan Lingxiu patted herself, her face slightly flushed, but she asked stiffly, Why are you here? I had no choice. Yunyang spread his arms. I was going home after drinking and happened to see you leading the 6 little ones this way. I was a little curious and wanted to see what you guys were up to. In the end, you brought me straight into the graveyard. And you didn't leave after entering the graveyard, wanting to spend the night here. Yunyang patted his chest. That really scared me to death. Shangguan Lingxiu blushed. You've been watching from the side? I was curious. Yunyang said, Sister Lingxiu is a heroine indeed, not inferior to a man. This young brother is impressed by your courage. I'm impressed. I'm impressed by you, Sister Lingxiu. Shangguan Lingxiu's face was as red as fire. Suddenly, she flashed her sword with a clang and said angrily, Yunyang, I've long heard that your mystical skill is amazing and that you're famous in Yutong. Come, let me spar with you. The corners of Yunyang's lips twitched. Since when did you hear that my mystical skill is amazing? Famous in Yutong? Why didn't I know that I had such a great reputation? It's obvious that I've caught you doing something cowardly, so you want to vent your anger out of humiliation. Although Yunyang had taken pity on her just now, he had no intention of being a punching bag now. Hold on, Sister Lingxiu. I know all about your efforts. Yunyang said, but to me, doing this is equivalent to pulling the seedlings up to hasten their growth. There's no positive effect. Shangguan Lingxiu sighed slowly. How can I not know that haste makes waste? It's better than doing nothing at all. Pulling the seedlings up to hasten their growth.
Even if the seedlings don't grow much, their enemies might not give them the time to mature.
Yun Yang was stunned.
As his thoughts raced, he actually felt that Shangguan Lingxiu's words made sense.
At this time, the 6 children had heard the commotion as well.
They ran over and saw their aunt standing by the side with another silhouette by her side. With a loud cry, the 6 tiny silhouettes charged over and formed a short human wall in front of Shangguan Lingxiu. 6 pairs of eyes glared at Yun Yang as they said in unison, "Don't bully my aunt."
"Baddie."
Yun Yang was amused. "Your aunt brought the few of you here to torment you on purpose.
"Why are you still protecting her?"
The eldest among the 6 children said boldly, "Aunt is training us, to give us more of the instinct to win in the battlefield."
"This is the Shangguan family of generals matter. What does it have to do with you?"
"We, the men of the Shangguan family of generals, protecting girls is our responsibility."
"Leave quickly, you baddie, and we can spare you. Otherwise..."
"Otherwise, what would you dare to do?"
Yun Yang teased, amused.
Shangguan Lingxiu, who was standing on the side, felt her eyes warm up as the sudden surge of warmth and gentleness almost overwhelmed her defenses. She forced herself to keep a straight face and said, "What do you 6 brats know?"
"This is your Uncle Yun, Auntie's friend. It's more important for you to cultivate now." The 6 children were stunned. The eldest child said blankly, "Uncle Yun? I've never heard of him. Is he our uncle-in-law?" Shangguan Lingxiu was furious.
"If you don't cultivate now, I'll..." Before she could finish, the 6 children disappeared with a whoosh. Looking at Shangguan Lingxiu's embarrassed look, Yun Yang could not help chuckling inwardly and said, "Children's words carry no harm.
Sister Lingxiu, don't worry."
Shangguan Lingxiu snorted and said, "You haven't told me what you're trying to do by following me."
Yun Yang replied, "I didn't follow you. Today's encounter is really just a coincidence."
Seeing that Shangguan Lingxiu was about to lose her temper, Yun Yang laughed and said, "Actually, it's because I can't bear to do it. Your training may be effective in the short term, but in the long term, it might ruin the cultivation path of these martial geniuses. Such a barbaric training method is not to be taken. It's not the right path for a cultivator."
Shangguan Lingxiu did not speak, looking at him quietly.
Yun Yang said, "Before Ling Xiaozue left, he had left me a mystical qi cultivation method, called the 3 Talents Mystical Qi. However, after I studied it, I realized that although the cultivation method was marvelous, it wasn't suitable for my physique." Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes shone. The cultivation method left behind by Ling Xiaozue was more than enough. More than enough. Of course, Yun Yang did not have any cultivation method left behind by Ling Xiaozue. What he had taken out now was only the cultivation method of his 6th brother, Supreme Thunder, other than the Thunder Crash spell. Moreover, he was truly touched by the Shangguan family of generals. Yun Yang took out the 3 Talents Mystical Qi cultivation method and passed it to Shangguan Lingxiu, but she took a step back to avoid it. She wiped her hands in agitation and said, Will this work? This was given to you by Master Ling. Will you really be all right if you give it away just like that?" Yun Yang could not help but feel amused. The lady before him was obviously tempted by the mystical book in his hands. If he were to take it back, she might even snatch it from him, but she had to say it in a roundabout way. It was adorable. He could not help but smile and say, "It's all right. I can guarantee this. Besides, Ling Xiaozue knows that my physique isn't suitable, but he still left this cultivation method to me. The meaning behind this is obvious." Shangguan Lingxiu hummed in acknowledgement and carefully accepted the 3 Talents Mystical Qi cultivation method. She began flipping through it page by page. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.